I was 13 years old and school had just been let out for the summer. I had a good friend that lived in a nicer area of town, and his parents let me spend weeks at a time staying at their house. He had a neighbor who lived across the street from him that always had broken down cars, TVs, microwaves, and just general clutter in their driveway. There lived a middle-aged woman and a middle-aged man. We hardly saw the man and only saw the woman if she was taking care of the yard. They had a large cornfield to the side of their home that was between their house and my friend's. Anytime you had the misfortune of crossing paths with this lady, she would give you the evilest death glare you could imagine. She would just stare you down until you were out of eyesight. She just gave off really creepy vibes. My friend and I loved to fish, and he had a lake about 2 miles away from his house. To get to the lake, you had to walk down the road in front of the creepy lady's house. We would go fishing 2 to 3 days a week and would spend all day there swimming, fishing, and generally having a good time. One day, we stayed way too late at the lake and found ourselves walking home around 11 p.m. We knew we were in deep shit and began running home. I was a fat kid with asthma at the time, so we had to make multiple stops. Unfortunately, one of these stops was in his neighbor's driveway, leaning up against one of the broken cars. We heard the front door open and the lady pokes her head out and yells, "Get the heck off my property, you little shits." She closes the door and we start fast walking towards his house. We hear the door open again, but this time she has a shotgun in her hands and it is pointed at us. My friend yells, "Gun!" And we both book it and dive into her cornfield army crawling in opposite directions. You could hear her footsteps thumping as she ran for the field. Once she reached it, I could no longer hear anything. No rustling of the corn, just silence. Then out of the blue I heard a gunshot. Boom. Followed by the pumping of the shotgun and another gunshot. You could tell she was just shooting in random directions. I heard some of the shot hitting some of the corn to my right and then to my left. She must have run out of shells because the gunfire stopped. Once I realized that she was out of shots, I stood up and ran faster than I ever had towards my friend's house. He was already there, waiting in the backyard for me. We lay in his grass watching the neighbor weave in and out of the corn looking for us. 20 minutes probably went by and she went back into her house. We knew this because you could hear the door slam. We went into his house and woke his parents up, who were mad since we were so late. We told them the story and they didn't believe us at first. They thought we were making it up. After an hour of attempting to convince them, they finally believed us because they could see how shaken up we were. And since we didn't have our fishing gear anymore, they called the police, who ended up responding extremely quickly. We told them what had happened and they went to talk to the neighbor. Apparently, when they knocked on the door, she was still holding the shotgun and her boyfriend/husband was in the middle of taking a hit off of his meth pipe. They were both arrested and we never saw them again. Shortly, their house was foreclosed on and torn down. A new neighbor built on the land, and they are very lovely people. I'm a 22-year-old female, but this story took place when I was 21. I live in a small town and I work in a pub in the town center. 2 pubs, 2 small shops, and a bank. On my walk home, I walk past one of the shops, which also has a small bus shelter next to it. Buses run every hour-ish, but none run after 8 p.m. After that, it's just residential housing, and then my house near the end of the road. All in all, from my job and my house, it's about an 8-minute walk. My town is usually dead after about 10 p.m. as everything is closed, and I would genuinely say it was relatively safe. Never had a problem with walking home alone. This incident happened on New Year's Eve, going into New Year's Day, so the pubs were open later. I finished my shift at about 1:30 a.m. and I, my boss, my boyfriend, and 2 other coworkers went to the pub next door for a drink before we went home. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I realized what time it was and that I needed to leave. My boyfriend lives on the other side of town, and I wasn't staying at his that night. My boss insisted on driving me home, and I kept insisting that he stay as everybody else was enjoying themselves and talking about the Christmas period that we had at work. Same with my boyfriend. He insisted on walking me home, but I was adamant that I was fine, and it was less than 10 minutes. Anyways, after a lot of pushback, I told him I was walking home. I really enjoyed walking without headphones and having a cigarette, especially after a shift, because it genuinely is so silent and peaceful. I didn't pass or see anybody until I got to walking past the shop. Like I mentioned previously, there is a small bus shelter next to it, and as I got closer, I realized there was a man sitting on the bench in the bus stop. Bear in mind, it is nearly 3 a.m. and even the pub we were at wasn't actually open anymore. They just let us in because we worked at the other pub. I didn't really think much of the man, but as I got closer, I realized I had served him at my shift earlier on in the night. He looked up as I was walking, and I realized he was sniffing some sort of drug, most likely cocaine, from his keys. I didn't actually know who he was, and I still don't, but he didn't seem threatening. He looked like he was kind of just chilling. Probably not the best choice of words, though, I guess. He did meet my eyes, and I was actually walking past the bus shelter. He said something along the lines of, "Sorry, darling, do you have a lighter I can borrow?" I was smoking as I was walking, so he knew I would have one. I stopped, and he was already walking towards me as I had, so I started digging one of the many lighters I had out of my bag. I was fully intent on just letting him keep it. I am not the type to stand with a 30-something-year-old man while he is lighting a cigarette. Then, he asked me for a cigarette, but I had lit my last one, which I said. During this whole interaction, he was very close to me, but I was kind of frozen in place. I'd realized that I'd stopped and was standing with a man in a dead-end street where nobody was around. I was still in the part of town where there isn't housing for another couple of minutes, and if anyone had come out of the pub, I was too far away where they wouldn't have seen me. I just started mumbling something like, "Keep the lighter, I've got to go." But this man who I had spoken to for about 20 seconds told me to just stop for a second, and where my feet had started to turn to walk away, I stopped again. Side note, I know I should have just walked away, but I thought maybe it was innocent enough, and I didn't want to give him a reason to provoke him if I just walked away from him. This time his demeanor switched, and he wasn't very polite to start with, but it's like him telling me to stop made him realize that I was a young woman walking alone at this time of night. I genuinely get the chills thinking about what he said. He looked me up and down and said the following: "You know, I've been really angry and I've been waiting for someone to hurt all night. You shouldn't be walking around here alone." My legs literally turned to jelly in that moment. I didn't even know if my phone was in my pocket or in my bag. I looked around and then said, "I'm not alone. My boyfriend is waiting for me around the corner. I'll be with him in a minute," and smiled. Just a barefaced lie. My boyfriend was still in the pub and had no clue that this interaction was going on. I thought maybe I should walk back on myself and go back to the pub, but I just decided not to. My house was closer. The man smirked as if he knew I was talking absolute BS and said that he would walk with me to meet my boyfriend. There was no boyfriend waiting for me around the corner. I kept saying there was no need, but he was on my tail, rambling about how I don't understand him, I don't get it, and that I need to walk with him and he isn't going to hurt me. And this whole time I kept thinking that he was going to grab my hair or pull me to the ground, and that any minute he was going to realize there was no boyfriend waiting. I ended up pulling my phone out of my pocket and it opened to our work group chat, and I just typed a message about a man walking with me, realizing my phone was on 2% and thinking that I just wanted someone to know what was happening. I didn't dare to go call my boyfriend. This guy started mumbling about how I wasn't listening to him, and by some miracle, when we turned around the corner onto my street, this guy didn't realize my boyfriend wasn't there. Or maybe he did, but he didn't say anything. He did up his behavior though and started spewing the most perverted stuff to me, saying about how I was a pretty young girl and I bet your boyfriend doesn't know how to handle you. The whole time I wasn't speaking, just speeding up and checking my phone discreetly. I realized that he was going to know where my house was, so I just thought I'm going to have to pretend one of these houses is mine. Otherwise, I will be leading him right to my house where my dad would be asleep at the back of the house. None the wiser. All of the houses on the street had a small gate and footpath leading to the door. So I chose a house with the light on and opened their gate. I turned to the guy and said, "This is me. See ya. Thanks for walking me," closing the gate behind me. I ran up to their door and shoved my key into the door that was not mine and hoped that this guy would leave and wouldn't wait for me to go inside the house. Thankfully, he didn't, and he started stumbling in the opposite direction, back down the street, away from where my actual house was. In what I thought was my only chance, I opened this gate and sprinted home. This guy clocked what I was doing instantly and started walking in my direction. By the time I got to my house, he had either not caught up quick enough or had given up. When I put my key in the door, I realized my dad had left his in the door internally, meaning I was locked out. I get my phone out and realize it had died in the time we were talking, so I just started banging on the door and my dad let me in after a couple of minutes. And that was it, but it was absolutely terrifying. I have not walked home alone since, and my boyfriend was so upset that he didn't push more and let him walk me home. Thankfully, I am okay and nothing physical happened to me. I'm a 14-year-old girl, and I, like the majority of teenagers, enjoy being home alone. My dad works from home, so very rarely does this happen, but when the opportunity arises, I will take it. One day, both my parents decided to take my brother to chess class and then go shopping in a strip mall nearby. They asked if I wanted to come, but seeing the chance to binge eat Halloween candy and watch Dexter with the sound turned all the way up, I decided to stay home. I do regret it now. They try to convince me to come, but I don't like going outside. Where are my fellow introverts at? And they left a couple minutes later. I settled in for a few hours of peace with a mountain of Twix and Kit Kats. Fight me, health nuts. And the glory that is Michael C. Hall. I don't know what chemicals those candy people put in this stuff, but I'm not complaining. After a few episodes, the candy was all gone, and all I had left were the shiny wrappers that I would probably sell my soul for, because I have an addiction. I went to throw them out and mourn the loss of the glorious chocolate caramel cookie that is Twix when I saw that the trash can was near overflowing. It was about 6:30 by now, but dark enough to basically be the middle of the night. I wasn't exactly comfortable to go outside in the dark, especially when the house next to me hasn't had anyone living in it for the past 2 years, which means bank people or whatever are constantly walking around it. However, the garbage bin is right next to the garage door, and I can get outside and back in about 5 seconds, so I decided to risk it. I went outside, threw the trash away, and as I was turning to go back in, I saw a man walking by. This isn't really that uncommon, as I live on a busy street and I live in an upper middle class area, so there's not a whole lot of crime and people go walking at night all the time. I thought it was kind of weird that he was wearing all black, because normally people want to be seen in the dark so they don't get hit by cars, but it didn't seem that strange. He was on his phone and didn't even look up at me, which I was thankful for because I was wearing a nightgown and had my hair a mess. I ran back inside and hit the button that closed the garage door. As it was slowly climbing down, the man raced inside. I was in shock. I stared at him. We made eye contact. He didn't have crazy eyes or anything. He looked perfectly normal. The garage door shut and he smiled wide. I shrieked and slammed the door that led into the garage shut and locked it. He started yelling at me about just wanting to be friends. Yeah, creeper man. I, a teenage girl home alone, will gladly befriend you. A man who just ran into my garage. I called my parents. I probably should have called the police, but I didn't want them to come home and have this strange man jump out and attack them once they got inside. They didn't pick up, of course. I texted them frantically, then called 911, who said they would send out a squad car. The next 10 minutes were probably the most frightening moments of my life. The operator stayed on the phone with me and told me to not go outside in case he had anyone else out there, but I could hear him in the garage. He didn't try to break the door down or anything. Instead, he scratched it and jiggled the doorknob and called for me to open the door, which was probably scarier than if he just tried to break the door down. I heard the garage door open and close, and then the police came. The guy was outside, sitting in front of the garage of the empty house next door. He said he was a landscaper and that he just wanted to talk with me, and that we had spoken before and were friends. I was basically hysterical at this point, and with my sugar adult brain, I couldn't even form coherent sentences. Screw you, chocolate. The cops did arrest him and my parents came home. They saw that I was alright and then seemed more concerned about the car that was in the garage than about me. I can't blame them. That car is older than I am and has sentimental value. I'm not going to go out at night ever, and I'm probably never going to be opening the garage door again. This happened back when our family moved to our new house in 2001. I was 8 years old and my sister was 10. Since we had just moved, my mom really wanted some new furniture to make our new home look nice. We weren't well off in the first place, but it was our first real home, meaning it wasn't a cruddy mobile home for once. We drove to a little value furniture shop that had a bunch of things to choose from. Of course, my sister and I, being typical siblings, were joking around with each other. She called me an ugly freak and I told her that her face was fat. Just normal things. Unfortunately, my mom couldn't find anything that she liked, so we left empty-handed. When we got into the car, she wanted to go to the grocery store and pick up a few things, so the trip wasn't a total waste. We drove along. My sister and I noticed a brown car following us, turning every corner, making every light, etc. We pointed it out to my mom and she just blew it off. Don't worry about it, guys. So we dropped it too. We were young and we completely forgot about it when we went to the general store and grabbed our snacks. Again, we got in the car and left for home. And again, the brown car started following us. Mom was getting a bit worried since we lived in another town 20 miles away. She told us it had to be somebody we knew. We had relatives living in the town, not just anyone we were really close to. Like they did before, they copied our route. The closer we were to home, the more paranoid my mother became and, in turn, fueled our fear. She told us to copy the license plate, but tried to assure us that it was probably our cousin Jessica or something. When we parked in our driveway, the car parked behind us, the engine still running. Our mom ordered us to stay in the car while she went to talk with our cousin. My sister and I watched from the rear window as my mom went to speak with her. After a few minutes, we heard the woman from the car yelling, gesturing to us inside the car, and then back to our mother. She peeled out of the driveway, almost running over my mother's feet. A few seconds later, my mom was crying hysterically and ordered us to get into the house. She pushed us into our room and spoke to our dad, even though we could hear everything. Apparently, the woman had thought we were insulting her while we were in the furniture store and threatened us. She had said that she would throw nails in our driveway and poison our dogs outside, and insisted that my mother beat us for talking to a complete stranger in such a way. And if she had the chance, she'd break our little necks if she heard us talking about her again. My dad wasn't very happy that my mom brought her all the way to the house, but stated it probably wasn't a big deal. The next day, my sister and I were walking to our bus stop when we saw the brown car parked across the street from our house. Sis immediately ran back inside to tell our dad, and he walked us to the bus stop and waited until we were safely on the bus. My mom wanted to do something about it, but my dad was against it. He assumed that the police wouldn't do anything since they were just threats. So the creepy, stalkerish behavior continued without interference. She began showing up every morning, watching us as we waited for the bus, but she was coming onto our property to make her presence known. My mom found a bottle of antifreeze near the dog's fenced-in area. It hadn't been opened, but we were told to bring in their bowls every night just in case. Food wrappers and half-empty cups of soda were thrown on our lawn. The air valve caps and lug nuts on our tires went missing on our tires. One of our outside cats died, but we couldn't pinpoint what happened. Then my older brother did something really stupid. My dad was tired of walking us to the bus stop, so he asked my older brother to do it. Spotting the car in its typical spot, he decided the smart thing to do was throw up his middle finger at her. This messed her up. She ran out of her car, cursing and yelling at us. She said that we were crazy and needed to learn our place as children. She was screaming and threatening to beat us and spitting at us. I was crying my eyes out and my brother had to pick me up because I couldn't move. We stayed home that day and my mom finally called the police. We gave them her license plate number and they said they would visit her in a day or two. My mom didn't tell me much, but when they confronted her about it, she went on a total rant about how kids are just dirty bastards and she'd kill every last one she could. They didn't arrest her, but a few days later, the police called my mom to inform us that the lady was admitted to a psych ward. There were no more details, unless my mom didn't want to share them, but we never heard from her again. Somebody on Ask Reddit introduced me to this wonderful sub, and I have a wonderful tale of creepiness to share with you. I'm honestly such a grumpy tomboy. I never imagined that I would end up with a would-be stalker, especially not with the career I chose. I was a forensic death investigator. Forensic police officers that generally work with the DEA's office and or the medical examiner's office that looks into cases of suspicious death. Occasionally, I'd run into people who had a passing interest in what I did because they'd seen CSI or Law & Order a few times. No big deal, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. It started out with a homicide scene that I'd been called to at a crazy hour in the morning when Mr. Fanboy showed up. He was around his late 30s to early 40s, average height and modestly fit, chatting away with one of the poor unis, guarding the scene. Not a big deal. It happens because people are curious, but then he whips out a camera and snaps a few pictures. At that point, I figured he was a really nosy tone-deaf journalist and decided to give him a polite lecture on how inappropriate it was to take photos of crime scenes, especially when we were getting ready to move the deceased body. I deleted the pictures, sent him on his way, and figured that I would never see him again. But no, he pops up again a week later at another questionable scene. It doesn't click yet that something is seriously off until a week later, he shows up at another scene, this one being a complete county away from the last one. So I worked a major city in Texas through the medical examiner's office, so we took cases from several surrounding counties, a few thousand square miles. So it was odd that this guy would show up to a rather standard scene on the outer edge of our covered area, even if he was press. I mention it to some coworkers when I get the chance, and they've noticed him hanging around some of their scenes too. When he showed up again, me and a uniformed police officer shake him down to see who the heck he is and why he's got a major hard-on for rubbernecking crime scenes. I'm used to rubberneckers, you know, I get it. People are curious and sometimes a bit morbid when something happens nearby. Once the excitement and newness wears off, they usually go on about their business. Mr. Fanboy doesn't have a criminal record, like not even speeding or a parking ticket, so my superior had a talk with him. Basically explained that he was making everybody nervous and it looked really shady to just start hanging out at all the crime scenes. So he disappears for a couple of weeks before switching to a new tactic. If you can't hang around the crime scenes, why not hang around the investigators? But of course, only the female ones. The Fanboy shows up at one of my favorite dive bars that I frequent, because it was near my home, over 30 miles from where I work. Now, I'm a 5'7" woman who doesn't look imposing in the least. My coworkers used to tease that I looked like I was a kid playing dress up in my uniform. Like most women, I tried to be polite with the guy, who at the time was about 20 years my senior, but declined any offer of a drink. He doesn't take the hints and chats me up with some of the creepiest stuff I have ever heard. What's the worst crime scene you've investigated? Have you ever worked on a case where the victim was dismembered? And do you think rape and murder cases are really about power dynamics and not sexually motivated? So I'm creeped the heck out. Those are things I don't even want to talk about with a therapist, much less a dude who is giving me some seriously rapey, murdery vibes. I completely shut him down, not even trying to be polite, and he seemed a little put off but not apologetic in the least. I went home, put my service weapon back on, and called my supervisor to give them a heads up, and start a paper trail for an RO. He served with a cease and desist a few days later, and I figured that the threat of an RO and trouble with the police will deter him from escalating any further. Not even 24 hours after the cease and desist is delivered, he's back to shadowing crime scenes like it's going out of style. At another female investigator's scene, he gets into an altercation with one of the uniformed officers. He gets slammed with trespassing, obstruction, and a few other charges, but since he has no record, he's let out on bail, and shows up to a scene I'm working not 3 days later. We get into a scuffle after she breaks one of my guy's noses to get onto the scene. He's not as strong as he looks, but I still ended up with the black eye. He looked worse by the time my partner and I finally get him cuffed. An investigation is opened and turned up a police scanner and a lot of creepy journals in his car, as well as notes on where I lived and worked, along with info on one of the other female investigators. From what I heard through the grapevine, his mother's house, where he was living, was very creepy. Yeah, I never thought people would be that obsessed with crime scenes, forensics, or the like that they'd end up going to jail. But here we are. I'm also very aware that he probably had a lot of very unsavory things planned for me and or one of my coworkers, which still makes my skin crawl to this day. In my teens, I had my fair share of encounters with creepy old men, and after my last post here, I figured I'd post another encounter I had. This happened when I was 15, over a decade ago. Wow, I'm starting to feel old. I've told this particular story to friends for years, but I've never posted it online. There were a lot of long stretches of industrial area in the town I grew up in. Large plazas with big parking lots, stuck next to one another in wide open stretches of road and highway. The majority of my town felt like the area before an airport. Flat, gray, and functional. As a depressed teenager, I used to go out after school a lot by myself. First, it wasn't within my neighborhood, but it escalated to me leaving the quaint residential areas to walk an hour or two in any direction. I'd usually make my way home before dark, and I had a trusty flip phone at the time to call my parents if I needed to. Generally, I felt pretty safe walking on the main streets because of how populous they were. There were always plenty of cars on the road, and there were quite a few pedestrians out and about. One early summer evening at about dusk, I was making my way home from one of my walks. It was a route I'd taken a lot, and I was about a 40-minute walk from home. I was just passing a parking lot when a car pulled out in front of me. I stopped about 2 feet from the vehicle to let it turn onto the road, but the driver rolled down his window. "Hey, how are you?" he asked me. The man looked to be in his late 40s and greeted me with an unsettling enthusiasm. I wasn't sure how to respond, but since I couldn't pass his car, I hoped he just needed directions or something. I'm okay. How are you?" Before I could even finish my response, he says, "I love your style. Goth girls and boots are one of my fetishes," he said. And I am not paraphrasing. Now, as I said, I've been approached quite a few times by creepy men, but this guy was beyond bold. I had absolutely no idea how to respond. Just as I was going to try to formulate a response, a car pulled up behind him, meaning that he was blocking another car from exiting the parking lot. There's a car behind you trying to get out," I tell him, relieved that I now have a way to get out of this conversation. "I'll meet you in the next parking lot," he said. And as I try to tell him now that I need to get home, he drives off. In my mind, there was no way he could be serious. I continue walking, but sure enough, he's in the next parking lot. The parking lot he'd entered was down a bit of a hill, and he was standing beside his car. As soon as he saw me, he started waving me down. I'd been followed by cars before, and I was generally afraid of the idea of making a man angry and being stalked to my home. I assessed the situation. He was parked about 10 feet from a dive bar, and there were about 15 men outside on the patio, which meant that they could see me and would be in earshot if I screamed. I weighed the options between going down to meet them versus potentially being followed home, and made the stupid decision to walk the slight incline. I honestly don't know why I didn't just pretend to be on the phone or call my mom. I don't remember what he said when I approached, but I kept my distance from him in his car so I wouldn't be easy to kidnap. He walked around to his trunk, and I felt myself tense up and take a step back. He then pulls out a pair of women's boots and approaches me slightly to show them to me. They were lace-up about mid-calf, maybe size 9. "Nice, aren't they?" he asks me. Yeah. I respond hesitantly. They were not nice, but my brain was on autopilot. So you want to try them on for me? He asks, smiling. I'm absolutely stunned. More than scared, I'm completely baffled that this is actually happening. I think I'm a little young for you, I managed to say. No, what, you're like 20, right? No, I'm 15. All the blood leaves his face, and he finally realizes that he's made a mistake. He quickly puts the boots back in his trunk and says something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm so sorry, you're just so hot. But I know I shouldn't be saying that." Kind of laugh him off and exit gracefully. He drives out of there well above the speed limit. I'm relieved, but left absolutely bewildered and creeped out. Why was he carrying around a pair of women's boots? How many women did he approach? What the heck just happened? What would have happened if I were over 18? And why did his brain think that what he just did was okay, even if I had been old enough? I still can't wrap my head around everything that happened, and I don't know if he thought that it would actually work, even if I were an adult. I'm in my late 20s now, which means that if he approached me today, he probably would be more insistent. So creepy boots guy, let's never meet again. So this is long, but this girl has been messing with my life and harassing me for almost 2 years, and it just keeps escalating. About a year and a half ago, I moved from a small city to a major Midwest city, after I started dating my boyfriend Dean. I had grown up in the surrounding area and was super excited about finally getting to live in the city properly. I was still leasing an apartment in the old city and couldn't break the lease, so Dean let me crash at his place for most of the week while I tried to make freelance connections. One of the first places I visited was an art gallery that Dean's best friend was in the process of building. I cut my leg open on some old auto parts in the lot that they were cleaning out and developed a pretty bad infection, so while I was waiting for Dean and Emerson, the gallery owner, to pack up and drive me home, I started talking to lots of random artists who were passing through the worksite. Somewhere during this, I must have met Kate. I don't actually remember meeting her, but she tracked all of my social media accounts down and followed or friended me on all of them. Kate was a comic artist, she said, and was very opinionated about the direction the city was going and super confident about her work. I didn't know anyone else. Most of my college friends in the area hadn't returned home from internships, so I was really excited to have a female friend who was also an illustrator slash comic artist. In the fall, when Dean left for a month, I house sat for him for a few days a week since I had 2 jobs, one in a new city and one in an old city, and I split my week between the 2 areas. To keep myself from getting stressed out, I started learning photography as a hobby and as a reason to get out of the house. Kate immediately commented on my status about it and requested to go along with me on one of my evening trips. The only issue is that I would have to pick her up in a fairly deserted part of town, by the old fairgrounds. Okay, I think. Weird, but I do really want to be friends with her and I don't like walking around alone. I drove to the fairgrounds and waited for about 45 minutes. No signs of Kate. I call and text her. Nothing. I get lost on the way back and I'm fuming mad and complain to Dean's housemate Lily. Lily takes me out for beers to vent about it and we end up becoming very close friends immediately. A couple weeks after this, right before Dean comes back to town, Lily and I get invited to Kate's art show. She makes a big deal about it, calls local newspapers, claims she's got a band and a sponsor deal. Not too crazy, since Emerson's gallery was hosting it. I figured she could have met friends to collab with, like Lily and I had. So we get dressed up and pregame a bit, and then head over. There's hardly any art up, and a couple people are uncomfortably walking around. Lily and I are getting a weird vibe, but Kate provided tons of liquor and free comic books, and her sponsor gave us free t-shirts. Score. We drink enough to mostly forget about Kate's weird attitude, and that she really only had one friend there, despite posts about a huge crowd. Later on, Kate likes all of my photos of the shirt and Lily wearing her shirt, and comments that we're super close friends, and that she was so glad we came. I hadn't actually remembered meeting Kate in person prior to this, and I know Lily hadn't, so that made us kind of uncomfortable. When Dean comes back, he comments on how close Kate and I seemed on Facebook. I laugh a little bit uncomfortably and say we've never really hung out. He brushes it off, and I do as well. In November, Kate frantically calls me, Dean and Emerson, asking for a place to sleep. She tells us that her roommate is being abusive and the cops won't come, and that she needs a place to crash, as she fears for her life. I'm super freaked out and offer to pick her up. She doesn't answer, so Emerson and I assume the worst and jump in my car. Right as we start driving, she calls us and announces that she's fine. A-okay. It's no big deal. Also, Emerson, I'm at your art space. Can I crash for a bit? She immediately gets a pizza on Emerson's tab and starts laughing and decides to host an impromptu party at the gallery, all the while claiming it was fine, but she had to go. In retrospect, this should have been the first red flag, but I wasn't about to claim someone's abuse story wasn't true. It did make me really suspicious, though, that it became okay with no repercussions. No issues with picking up her stuff, that turned out totally fine. The whole thing was solved by a pizza. Over the next couple of months, Kate starts going on crusades against random organizations that she's been involved with. Most of her criticism involves that they were somehow abusing or bullying her. I get fed up with it pretty quickly, especially when one of her prime complaints is, Incubator. Try to advertise my services and get me freelance clients. Like last time I checked, that was kind of a good thing. Over the winter, I had a bit of a mental breakdown and didn't see Kate around town as often. It was a struggle to not be snappy with her, as I was feeling pretty negatively towards most people, and I couldn't deal with her conspiracy theories and false drama. Plus, she would always bring me pieces of art and seek out my approval, then scream at me every time I said something even vaguely critical at all. I just couldn't deal with that. In March, Dean took me out to see a show during a local bar and restaurant week, and several of our friends were rapping on stage during it. Emerson, a friend from out of town, Dean and I were hanging out with the bartender, another friend of ours, and we saw Kate arrive. All of us were wearing cocktail or club attire, but Kate was wearing a ratty sweatshirt and sweatpants, hadn't combed her hair. She's usually a casual dresser, but this came across pretty strongly as something is off, since she always made an effort to do her hair and put on jewelry with hoodies. She dragged my friend from out of town and the girl he was flirting with over to the other side of the bar, and announced that I may have the sketchbook with me, but she is the real artist and he ought to hear about her comic. Now, not to be petty, but if we're going to compare work, her comic was really bad. My depression was affecting my ability to do good work, and even in comparison, hers was really bad. Like mediocre DeviantArt. No backgrounds, no plot, half the main people are vampires and hot guys, all drawn with her boyfriend's face. Yeah, I should note also that at the time of this I was 23 and assumed she was as well. I was annoyed but wanted to enjoy my night, so I shut up for a bit and listened. Then Emerson leaned over and, as we watched her down shots like a college freshman, he said, "Can you believe Kate is 33? She acts like a kid." What? So now my alarm bells were going off slightly. Like, why is Kate seeking out only people who are 10 years younger than her? And I looked closely and realized she physically looked her age, but being slightly heavier, she was intentionally playing up a slight baby face with hoodie, a ponytail, and minimal makeup. Kate then came over and spent most of the night rambling conspiracy theories at me, and insisted she could sense that the guys on stage were going to be involved in some kind of shootout. She was sure of it, and kept whispering into my face way too closely. Dean and I went to a diner afterwards and found that Kate had convinced the rap person Emerson to follow us, but eat at a separate table. She came over to my area and stage whispered, "It's okay. I think that because I'm with them, I've managed to save them from what fate wanted." Wow, we noped out of there so fast. It was really hard to avoid Kate entirely after that, even though I wanted to. She managed to show up the day Dean asked me to move in with him, but offered to help us paint our workspace, so we had to drive her home and listen to her theories about fate and horror movies and plots for her vampire comic the whole way back. We didn't end up celebrating because the mood was pretty well killed. On Facebook, she got increasingly unhinged. She'd latch on to any comment I or somebody else made that she could decide was negative and triggering for her. This would include anything from not liking her status to saying we didn't agree with the countdown of top coffee shops in the city. She'd then rant passive-aggressively on Twitter about whoever said it for hours. It started extending to her business, too. She accused one guy of blackmailing her and stealing her rent, when he'd actually paid her the full amount for art in advance and was simply asking when it would be delivered by. She had an art show at a coffee house, but didn't even stay for 30 minutes of it, and stormed out in a screaming tantrum because they decided to provide her with musicians for her show and serve coffee during it. She then called one of the local newspapers, claiming that they had severely wronged her and ruined her show. I think you get the picture. So, I've been pretty much trying to ignore her for the last year, but she keeps escalating her behavior. She's lately taken to telling Dean that I'm evil and isn't subtle about it. In October, she crashed a housewarming party that our coworkers were holding and started drunkenly yelling about how Dean should dump me for one of our colleagues. She also regularly stalks me on Twitter and Instagram and tweets about my evil activities without using names. But then as soon as I tell her to stop, she tells everyone openly that I'm an asshole and is ruining her life by bullying her. Somehow. Annoying, but boring to be totally honest. Most recently though, she started targeting my boss at an activist blog I work part-time for. I do a lot of design with mental health advocacy and queer issues, so I'm pretty visible to anyone trying to find me online. And one of my side duties for the blog is to find trans and queer media for my boss, Aiden, to check out, in case they make a good article. I noticed that Kate had published a comic that looks really good that was about trans characters and Afrofuturist themes. I was a little nervous about sending it over because Kate, but I figured it was unlikely that Kate would be angry about a positive review. Aiden was a bit concerned, as a queer trans writer, that this was being written by a cisgender author, so he asked her some friendly questions about plot summary and her sources for information about the community. Pretty standard book review stuff. Kate blew up, ranted at him via Twitter and called him racist for asking her about the comic. And it got to a harassment level where Aiden had to block her and shut down most of his non-work social media accounts for a while. She then signed into her professional account and pretended to be a spokesperson for her comic group and called him racist again, and said that he was harassing and bullying her, despite him not being actually online for most of the day. It's been about 3 days. So far she's called his primary employer to try to get him fired for being a racist bully, which is not true at all, hunted down all of his Reddit, Tumblr, and even Amazon accounts, and has been arbitrarily messaging Redditors and random activists she finds online to tell them how horrible Aiden is. At the moment, he's not interested in calling the cops, but she escalated it today for me, where I might be. She found mine and Dean's address via a Facebook event, and has been telling random users on Twitter that I masterminded Aiden's campaign of harassment and giving them my email and other info for doxing purposes. Luckily, so far, nobody's really taken the bait, but I did get a lot of new followers on my art accounts who are all quote-unquote friends of hers. For all I know, they're also her. Aiden and I also have gotten a lot of emails sent to our blog's address, saying how much the art and banners suck and that I don't deserve to be working for it. I don't know that she's done anything with the address, but it scares me that she knows it. She likes Dean and my dog still, for some reason, but I'm scared that she'll try and steal my dog or break into our house, now that she knows where I live. She has the mentality that I don't deserve nice things like my dog or my career accomplishments as much as she does, which really creeps me out. So yeah, advice is welcome, but mostly I just had to get this off my chest. So this happened a few months ago, right when I was just married to my husband. I know it wasn't a product of wedding stress since people around me had been as freaked out as I was. My mother-in-law and I were out of town shopping and we stopped at the local Walmart on our way home. She had gone to look at air conditioning units and so I went to browse the book section. I just found something that caught my interest when I heard somebody say, "Jessica." I was in one of those, "Oh, there you are" tones of voices, like it was both a pleasure and a relief. Jessica isn't my name, but I look up anyway since it was loud and basically right next to me. Standing a few feet away, her shopping cart between her and me, was a thin woman, maybe late 40s, long brown hair and clothes, nicer than what you would expect to see on somebody who frequented Walmart. Her shopping cart was empty. She stood looking directly at me with a huge manic, teeth-revealing grin, eyes bright. Because she's looking directly at me and there's no one else in the aisle, I feel obliged to talk to her. I smile because she's smiling and tell her she's made a mistake. My name's not Jessica. There you are, sweetie. I was so worried about you. The woman continues and wheels up to me with my exuberance, making me shrink back because I can already smell the crazy. A few people are passing our aisle at this time, and the woman's overly exaggerated tone gets their attention. Some heads snap to look at us, but nobody stops. The woman, very warmly, as if I was her daughter, caresses my arm. I've been looking everywhere for you. Honey, let's go. Your dad has been waiting. I am a person who is anxious to please other people, so I'd already taken a step forward when she gently pressed my back so I would walk. Then my brain asked, "What the heck are you doing?" And I did a little scuttle forward. "Jessica, honey, stop playing around, let's go." The woman had never yet lost her crazy smile. This time she grabbed my arm like a vice and started to pull. I pull my arm back, setting in my heels and putting my body into motion. I tell her to leave me the heck alone or I'm going to find my husband. My husband isn't there, but she doesn't know this. The woman freezes and her face twitches. "Dirty little bitch," she hisses, and wheels off down the aisle. "You're ungrateful." I hear her shoot over her shoulder. Then when she reaches the end, "Okay, bye pumpkin. See you for dinner." I wait and watch her turn the corner and disappear, and then go to the opposite way. I manage to find my mother-in-law and tell her what happened. She's a little disconcerted, but makes light of it, trying to make me feel better. When we are in the checkout line, I'm scanning around nervously, trying to see if she's anywhere near us. I spot her several checkouts down, and she spotted me. She's still got her weird smile on, and she's wandering away with her empty shopping cart. She has a hot beverage in one hand, which she drops and spills on the ground. She never stopped to even look at it. She just breezed out of the store. One of the employees watched her do this and leave, but never said anything to her. In fact, the expression on the employee's face made it seem like she was a little bit afraid. I have luckily never seen her again, and hopefully never will. Hey everyone, so I'm a guy from the UK. I live in a town in Wales, albeit not the little villages most people imagine. My town is a popular holiday destination along the coast of Wales. This isn't overly relevant to the story, but I just thought I would give everybody some context. I did actually post this story on a separate Reddit account several years ago in a different subreddit. However, I highly exaggerated it for the sake of the story, and this was a creative writing subreddit, I believe. I can't fully remember, I just remember the story I told wasn't 100% honest. So if you think you've read something similar before, then you probably have. But this is the full truth of what happened and is likely way less exciting than the original story, but oh well. So it started when I was around 15 years old, about 8 years ago. I was dating a girl from about 2 towns over. I would usually get the train to hers and back. However, this one night her family weren't supposed to be home, and we were kind of being watched by her brother, who was about 19 or 20 and was overall pretty chill. The plan was to stay the night. We were up late playing on the Wii, but her parents unexpectedly came home. I never got along with her mom, and the whole thing got kind of heated, and I was kicked out of the house and told I couldn't stay over. It was about 2 a.m. and I didn't want to call my own parents and worry of waking them up. My mom is a very strict woman, so I began the long trudge home. It was roughly about an hour and a quarter worth of walking, so I was expecting to be home around 3:30. So I walked along the weird concrete bit just above the beach, not sure if what that's called, and I stopped about half an hour of walking as There is a public toilet which is kind of run down, but also open 24 hours, and I was desperate. I was expecting it to be empty or just have a homeless dude sleeping in it, but I was wrong. There was this guy using the urinal. He looked to be in his mid to late 50s, I think. A little on the overweight side, but not extremely. He had gray, messy-ish hair, but other than that, he looked pretty normal. He definitely didn't look homeless. I remember he made a quick joke about something I don't remember. I politely laughed and did my business and left. After about another 15 minutes of walking, the weather had gotten pretty bad. It started to rain heavily and the wind was picking up. I seem to remember this was around November time, so it was pretty cold. Anyways, I'm walking and a car drives by, beeps and pulls over just in front of me. I had assumed it was someone I know but couldn't think who. Got to the car and the dude from the toilet was inside. He asked me where I was headed and I told him. He said that was a long walk and I couldn't be expected to walk all that way in this weather, and he offered me a lift. In hindsight, I probably should have refused, but the weather was very bad, and at the time he wasn't giving me any weird vibes. The drive took like 15 minutes, I think. The more I was in the car with him, the more I started to get vibes that there was something off about him. He was telling me his best friend was a 14-year-old lad who stays over at his place a lot, and they drink together, and if I ever wanted to join, I was welcome to. He was asking me some really invasive questions as well. I don't fully remember what they were. I just remember it's not the kind of questions you ask someone that you are giving a simple lift home to. Anyways, we got to the street around the corner from my place, and I asked him to just drop me off there. I said that my house wasn't accessible by road and that I would walk the rest of the way. He gave me his number and told me to ring him when I got back to my house safely, as he wanted to make sure I was okay. I asked him what his name was, as at this point he knew my full name, and he just said Pete. My phone wants a surname. He wouldn't tell me. Just kept saying, just call me Pete. I later found out that Pete was a fake name too. Anyways, I got into my house and texted him just to let him know I was safe. Probably a bad decision, but back then I was full of bad decisions, to be honest. The next day came and I was expecting everything to be normal. It didn't, because I stupidly gave Pete my number when I texted him. I started to get texts from him every morning, basically just saying good morning to me and wishing me well. I replied to the first few and then started ignoring them. He then started trying to ring me every single evening. I would ignore most of his calls, but he would often repeatedly ring until I would answer. He was sending me these texts inviting me over to his house for some drinks. He kept telling me he just gotten himself a pool table and wanted me to come and play it with him. He was telling me a story of a friend that he was playing pool with, the 14-year-old I was talking about, and accidentally let it slip that the guy called him John. I confronted him about this and said, I thought your name was Pete. He said, oh no, my friend's name is John. I said, you just said your friend called you John, and you told me your friend was called Tom. He said, oh well, some people call me John. It's like a nickname, but his name is John too. He hesitated saying this, and I kind of clicked that he was telling me a bunch of lies. I kept refusing, but he kept asking. After a while, my mom wanted to know who this dude who kept texting me and ringing me was. I told her and she rang him herself from her phone and told him that if he ever carried on texting me and ringing me, she would be calling the police. I didn't get any more texts from him after that, but it didn't end there. I had a routine, you see, and he knew this. I always walked my dog at 4:30 every afternoon and played with her for 40 minutes on the field at the end of my street, just near where he had dropped me off. I started to notice his car pulling up there within 5 minutes of me getting there with my dog. He had tinted windows, but I would always notice the car lights were always left on, and the engine was always running. Also, I recognized his car. I would occasionally notice the car door open in a large flash from that direction, as if somebody was taking pictures. I started changing the time I walked my dog, but he would eventually figure it out and start showing up either or late to coincide with when I was walking her. This went on for months and I never mentioned it to anyone, but one day it just stopped. He stopped pulling up at the side of the field. Never saw his car anymore. Not text messages or phone calls from him. It all just stopped. I ended up getting a new phone after about a year and had that for another 2 years. I dug out my old phone when I was around 18 to 19 after the aforementioned dog died. I had some old pictures and videos of her on that phone and wanted to transfer them over to my PC so that I always had them. I turned on a phone which had been turned off for several years now and still had the old SIM in it. That's when I got my final message from Pete. It was an odd one, and it was about 14 months old. It said something along the lines of, "Hi, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I just thought you should know that over the new year I was diagnosed with an illness and I've been told I don't have long left to live. You were a good friend in the short time we knew each other. I live at," sent me his address, "and would really appreciate it if you could come around just so I can have a last chat with you. Got some beers in, and if it gets too late you can stay the night. Just drop me a phone call when you want to come around so that I can get everything ready for you. See you soon." No idea if Pete or John was genuinely ill or just trying to lure me to his house. Never been to the address he sent me and never responded to him or heard from him since. I didn't reply to him, and that was the last I heard from the guy. So yeah, that's the story. Not tremendously exciting, but kind of had a big impact on me during those years. Hope you all enjoyed. In the spirit of Halloween, I will share an incident that happened to me last October. It was 10 a.m. on a weekday and I had the day off, so I decided to go to the grocery store and get some pumpkins to carve. I did my shopping with no problems and didn't notice anything off since it was earlier in the day and the other shoppers were elderly. I bought 3 large pumpkins and had them in a cart to put in the trunk of my car. As I was putting the first pumpkin in my trunk, holding it with one arm, opening the trunk with the other, and my back to the parking lot, I feel somebody pulling the pumpkin out of my arm backwards. I spun around and threw that pumpkin in the process to see 2 men directly behind me. I'm a very small girl, so I immediately felt endangered. The one man, who I assumed was the man who first grabbed at me, made an attempt to scream at me in a language I didn't understand and grab at me again. I pushed the cart with the remaining pumpkins at the 2 men and got in my car to lock the doors and drive away. The 2 men got into a white brand new Dodge Charger with temp plates and sped out of the parking lot after me. The street we both pulled out on was a busy 4-lane, 25-mile-per-hour business district. You can't safely speed. That didn't matter to the Dodge Charger, who weaved in and out of traffic to try and run me off the road. The driving was so erratic that another driver attempted to box the Charger in. Didn't matter much. They went into incoming traffic anyway. Meanwhile, I threw my left turn signal on and made a quick right into a coffee and donut chain I regularly frequent. Next to this coffee chain is a pizza chain, not yet open. I noticed that the Charger had pulled into this pizza chain and was waiting for me to pull out the coffee chain parking lot. I frantically told the employee what was going on through the drive-thru while I ordered a snack. I mean, I was there and didn't want to pull out yet. This coffee chain knows me well, and on this day, the manager went above and beyond the call of duty. She called the police, who told her to have me pull around to the window. She did, knowing I would be in full view of the Charger, so she came outside to stand between us with the biggest rolling pin I've ever seen in my life. She stared those men down like my own mother would have. The cops came and took statements. The Charger was still there and searched. One officer told me they pulled tarp and rope from the trunk and are treating this as a trafficking attempt. Both men refused to answer any questions and were arrested. I don't know for sure what their intent was, but I live in a sanctuary city with mostly people from Nepal or Bhutan, and I have never had a scary issue. I love my neighborhood, but I did not recognize these men or their car frequenting the neighborhood. That day, I bought everybody working at that coffee chain a gift certificate for a massage as a thank you for protecting me, and I still tip them every morning extra a year later. For some background, when I was around 16 or 17, I worked at a local Tim Hortons store for some extra cash. Nothing too unordinary, just a lot of old folks coming to get their coffee and morning office runs. It wasn't until I started covering midnights for people on the weekends when a strange man started appearing randomly. It started with him picking up money from the drive-thru lane, which is by law illegal. He was talked to and stopped picking up the change, but at night in the drive-thru cameras, there was always two pinpricks of whitish-greenish lights coming from the garden and whispers in our headsets that none of us would admit to. I always thought it was my coworkers playing tricks on me. I mean, we had a lot of jokesters. The whispers would say things like, "I will skin your bones," and "You will enjoy your last bagel." I always got a bagel on break. It made me shiver at the thought somebody was always watching, but again, it was most likely my coworkers. The man became bolder, and he started ordering weird things like a biscuit not toasted with butter. But then he wanted it toasted and soaked in coffee. One night he came in with blood on his shirt, and when we asked him if he needed first aid or an ambulance, he just said that he needed to pee and that he was fine. My supervisor called the police right away as she came in from changing the outside garbages and was bawling her eyes out. She asked me as the phone rang if anyone had come inside, and I said, "Yes, a man. He went to the washroom, but I think he's hurt." She screamed as she realized it wasn't his blood. She told the operator, "I was changing the outside garbages when I saw a man laying on the sidewalk. He was caked in blood and not breathing. I think the killer is in the bathroom." The police department was no longer than 5 minutes away, and they dragged the man out of the washroom. He was completely naked and trying to touch himself with the blood of the man he killed. I threw up when he started to get very aroused and orgasm. The store was closed after that, and from what I know, it wasn't an aggravated killing. And even worse, I don't think it hit the news. I'm not sure why these things never hit mainstream news, but I feel like it's the company covering it up. When I was a teenager, probably 16 and male, I took a female friend and went to a nearby big city to see Panic at the Disco on concert. This was their pretty odd era, and Ryan and Ross were still in the same band. I was super excited, but the concert was far enough that we didn't want to drive back that night, so we got a hotel room. My grandparents drove us, so we had our own hotel room. My grandparents next door. When my grandpa picked us up after the concert, we decided that we weren't ready for bed. Still high from the concert and also sore from all of our dancing and tireless attempts to start mosh pits at the show. We went out to where the front desk was, and there was a man at the desk, not super old but old enough to think of us as kids. We manipulated him into letting us into the pool after hours, telling him that we were sore from the show and sweaty too. He told us to be quiet and not make a big mess in there, and we agreed. It was fine. We decided, however, to see if we could get him to give us some food. Took us to the kitchen, but other than fruit, there was nothing that didn't need to be cooked, so he goes, "Well, if you don't tell anyone, I'll go get you a steak and shake." And we agreed enthusiastically. So he leaves, and he's gone for a little while, and this is where it gets weird. When he comes back, he has a huge bottle of whiskey with him. He invites us, 2 minors, back to drink and eat in the office with him, so us being dumb kids, we accept. He proceeds to show us on the office computer his MySpace profile, where his name is something like Timmysaurus Rex, and he's like 31 years old. Kind of weird alone, but it gets weirder. He wants to add us, and we lie and say we don't use MySpace because, what the heck, we don't want to be friends with somebody almost twice our age. And he's like, "Oh, okay." So I'm getting weird vibes at this point and don't drink much, and once we've both had some alcohol, he tells me and my friend it would be cool if we took our pants off and copied our butts in the copier machine because it would be funny. And I'm like, nah. But my friend stupidly does it. So we're still hanging with him, both not knowing that the other was only doing it because they didn't want to awkwardly leave. So at some point I leave, for some reason, at which point I wouldn't find out until later. He kissed my friend, and she obviously pulled away and left and didn't let it go any further. Then I came back and wasn't sure where she went, so I asked Timmy if he'd help me find her, and she was like, "Sure, I have to put bills on the doors." So he was going room to room and putting the bills on the doors when he suddenly backed me. An inexperienced and also ugly, awkward boy against the wall and kissed me really greedily, like with lots of super wet tongue. I pulled away super awkwardly and kind of awkwardly said he tasted like alcohol, and he laughed. So eventually we find my friend and I grab her and pull her away from him and tell him that we'll wait for him in the front. When I tell her he kissed me once we were away from him, and she was like, what the heck, same. So we were both super creeped out at this point and decided to sneak back to our room before he gets back to us, and just kind of sat there for a while thinking like, okay, that was weird. How about we don't tell anyone? Thankfully, when we woke up to check out, somebody else was working the front desk. We left and I didn't tell any adults until years later. Thrifting is my favorite hobby, if you can call it that. It's something I like to do alone when I get the time, as it's a chance for my brain to shut off and just let go as I scan aisles crammed with random things for hours. Note, I'm a 5'5" former elementary teacher. I'm about as intimidating as a wet sock, and I'm pretty quiet and stay to myself in public. I had decided to go out of my way to a store I hadn't been to before and follow my usual routine. When I'm in a store, it's just me and the items. I don't pay any mind to anyone around me, as the stores are crowded and I'm really only there to do my own thing. So imagine my surprise when an older woman turned to me and said in a huff, "Can I help you?" I turned and looked around me to make sure I was who she was talking to. I just shook my head no, making a confused expression, and went back to looking at shoes. Things were okay for a minute before I heard her in the next aisle talking to her friend. "This creepy woman is following me. Every time I look up, she's there." There is only so much space in the store. I usually go along the edges and then make my way to the center of the store, so there is a good chance she probably just saw me doing my thing. I tried to avoid her until I realized she started talking to random people around me about how creepy I was and how I was stalking her. People started giving me funny looks, but paid no mind once they realized how harmless and shrimpy I look. Her? Really?" someone said. "Yeah, and I'm gonna mess her up if I see her again." She began making more and more aggressive comments, and I decided I had enough. I've never fought anyone in my life, and I really wasn't planning to that day. I left my items and went to my car. Yeah, something was up with her, and I wasn't sticking around to find out what it was. To the actual creepy lady in the thrift store, let's not meet again. I was friends with two people, Tammy and Aaron. Well, more so friends with Aaron than Tammy, but we'll get into that. This story is primarily about Tammy. I met Aaron in my freshman year of college, and we quickly became best friends. Soon, Aaron began dating Tammy, and they were basically inseparable. As such, due to proximity, I was forced to be friends, or at least friendly, with Tammy. Whenever I'd hang out with Aaron, 9 times out of 10, Tammy would be there too. Tammy and I had a few common interests: video games, certain board and card games, so I decided to give her a shot. However, I quickly found Tammy to be insufferable. She was rude, narcissistic, and had a hair-trigger temper. Everybody I will talk to about Tammy would say the same. Despite this, I had to remain friendly with her whenever she was around. In her mind, this made us best friends, though for me, it was more of an appeasement. I feel like she latched onto me because I was one of the few people who was willing to tolerate her. As you can imagine, she had very little in the way of friends. Fast forward to 4 years later, Tammy and Aaron are still dating and now living together. It's an extremely toxic relationship. Tammy would scream at Aaron daily over small things, making them terrified to make any mistakes in front of Tammy. Aaron felt trapped in the relationship. I was doing everything I could to convince them to leave, no matter the potential costs. Thankfully, Aaron eventually stood up for themselves and ended up breaking up with Tammy last November. However, Tammy still wanted to keep her perceived friendship with me. Part of me felt bad for her. I unfortunately can be a bit of a bleeding heart, so I humored her but did my best to keep her at arm's length. She gave me an unsolicited gift for Christmas, a deck of Magic the Gathering cards. We played that a decent amount of times together. However, I already owned this deck but did not have the heart to tell her that. Instead, I politely thanked her and took the cards. Later, I quietly regifted the cards to my real best friend. This will be important later. Fast forward to my birthday, which was recently, not going to give the exact date, Tammy gave me yet another unsolicited gift. This time it was homemade weed cookies. I am a stoner, but I have a notoriously low edible tolerance compared to my weed tolerance. Such even low doses of edibles like 5 milligrams THC tend to be too intense for me, and I usually just stick to smoking bud. She claimed that the cookies were dosed at 20 milligrams THC a cookie. I was ready to eat these, but decided, what the heck, and ate 1/4 of a cookie. That's right, 1/4. Despite that tiny amount, about 45 minutes later, I began to feel abnormally high. The room began spinning for me. This tends to happen for me when I smoke too much at once. I have a rug in my living room and it has a particular zigzag pattern. It began to move beneath me in an unnerving and nauseating pattern. I've done a few mushroom trips in my day and age and this felt very similar. However, I have never experienced anything close to this with weed. Then my heart began beating extremely fast to the point where I genuinely felt like I was having a heart attack. No matter how many breathing exercises I did, I could not get it to calm down. Finally, I felt extremely nauseous, probably from seeing the room spinning, and I ran to the bathroom and stayed there for about an hour in front of the toilet. I gagged and dry heaved several times, but nothing ended up coming out. Approximately 4 hours later, I began to feel normal again and was able to get some sleep. The next day, I felt like I had a hangover, akin to taking 10 shots the previous night. I confronted her about my bad experience the previous night, and I kid you not. She simply said, "Oh, oopsies, it was actually more like 80 to 90 milligrams per cookie." It took everything in my power to not slap her over that. I calmly expressed that I no longer wished to continue our sham of a friendship and promptly blocked her on all platforms. I have not since spoken to her, and it is definitely for the best. Come to find out a few days later that my best friend had casually mentioned the regifting to Tammy a few days after before she made the cookies. As such, while I have no definitive proof, I am inclined to believe she took this personally and made the cookies as a form of revenge against me. I'm glad I only ate 1/4. Dear people of Reddit, do I have a story for you? I will start by saying though my story is not long, it is very scary considering it could have gone much worse than it did. This happened just last night in a place my kids, my wife, and I just moved into a week and a half ago. It's a small place in a rough area, but I grew up in this area and it was affordable. So on Friday, my sister-in-law has a son who was going to be in the hospital the entire weekend getting surgery. My wife and I volunteer to watch the newborn daughter. So Saturday, my niece is sleeping all day, which brings me to Saturday night. She wakes up right before sunset, is non-stop crying. My wife and I guess she misses her mom, but we can't really do anything about that. Mom is in the hospital. In order to give my wife some peace, I go to the living room to chill with the crying baby. I am rocking her back and forth, giving her a pacifier, and her spitting it out. Good times. What happens next is so perfect that I'm glad it happened the way it did. My daughter, 10 years old, comes out the kids' room and says, "Daddy, if you're tired, I can watch the baby." I was going to refuse, but my wife shouted from the room that she should do it. So in my head, I'm like, why not take a quick break before they all gotta go to bed? At first, I thought I'd lay in bed with my wife, but she was watching an action movie. Taken. I wanted some quiet time after a long day. I tell her I'm gonna look through my work bag in the living room for a few minutes, and I work as an armed guard, so I check that. Badge, name tag, all my permits and paperwork are in the right place, and that nothing is missing. Then I see a flash of light through my window. I look out the window and I see nothing. I noticed a helicopter flying around, so I think the light was the helicopter. I sit back down and look at my lockbox and decide, One quick look at my gun won't hurt, if it's unloaded anyways. Well, of course, as I'm pulling it out, my daughter comes out of the room. She was going to ask if we fed the baby when she paused. I hastily shoving my gun back in the lockbox so she wouldn't see it, didn't hear anything. So I asked, "Sorry, what did you say?" When she is still frozen staring at the door. I asked what was wrong and she said, "Somebody knocked on the door real hard." So I brush it off as maybe her imagination or the helicopter, when a booming crash comes from the door and it bursts open. It felt like an hour passed as my daughter and I stared at the empty black doorway. My son, 8 years old, comes out of his room to ask what happened. I regained my composure and shouted for my kids to run in my room with my wife and to lock the door. And I loaded my handgun, grabbed my flashlight. So I checked my door and I was still able to lock it. I check around the entire perimeter of the house and I find nothing. So whoever tried to break into my house when I was obviously home, that's not me, because I am waiting for you. I went to this primary school from 2006 to 2008. I was 12 when this happened and my sisters were 10. The school was horrible. Teachers would swear and throw things at you and the principal did nothing about them. After school, I would either be in chess club or working in the library. Yes, I was a nerd that had bad grades, and after school our chess teacher would give my sisters and I a lift home. A few weeks after he started giving us a lift home, we noticed a combi was following us. I remember it clearly. It was white with curtains on the windows. So we, my sisters and I, circled around the block to ensure that we were being followed, and we were. Totally freaked out, we went to our neighbor's house and they let us in and the neighbor's husband stood outside with a bat in his hands. When our parents got home, they contacted the school and the police. The next 2 weeks, we had to work with the police and they apparently found the guy. I overheard the police saying that the man must have had a partner. That statement stuck to me. I refused lifts from any male teachers and male friends of our parents, so we walked home from then on but with a group. Fast forward a little while, I was 15 and my sisters were 13. My sisters and I are now in high school. We decided to go visit the primary school. As we got there, we bumped into one of the students we knew and he told us the chess teacher got arrested. I asked him for what, and what he said next sent a chill down my spine. He told us that the teacher got arrested for attacking children. He got caught when he tried to put an 11-year-old girl in his club room and she screamed for help. To think he gave us a lift home and had some equipment in the boot of the car. I contacted the cop who dealt with the Combi case and asked him about the teacher. It turned out the teacher told the Combi guy about us and was planning to take one of us if we hadn't gone to our neighbor. Please guys, have your kids vigilant at all times. Set something up with a neighbor in case your kids are in trouble and they need to get away and you're not around. Stay safe. Okay, so around 9 or 10 years ago, I was living with my mom, dad, and older sister in an old-ish house in a very small village. When I say small, I mean its only main feature was a small church and a few scattered houses occupied mostly by very old people. All the time, it was the summer, so I wasn't at school or anything, and since we were so far in the middle of nowhere, I spent most of that time at home, glued to one screen or another. The usual routine was I'd wake up at around 10 or 11. By this point, mom, dad, and sister had all left for work, so I had the house to myself. I'd go downstairs, make some toast, watch some random stuff on TV for an hour, before heading back to my room to continue with whatever game I was grinding through that particular day. The usual habits of a 17-year-old guy cut off from the world by many fields. I should give a quick rundown of our house. It was an older cottage with 2 rooms upstairs, mine and my sister's, and everything else was downstairs. As you walk up the stairs, you got to a very small landing and could go either left to my room or immediately right to my sister's room. Basically, the way this was laid out was that I could sit in my room with the door open and my sister's room is directly opposite. I should also mention that the ceilings in both of our bedrooms were slanted. We were basically in a large attic where the roof slanted down. Because of where the slant met the wall, we had crawl space that ran the length of the house on either side of the rooms, both with a small door to access them. These were mostly used for storing normal attic stuff, like Christmas decorations and old forgotten toys. The doors to these were thin little things, about 4 feet tall, with a small handle on the outside. This is important because turning these tiny doorknobs opened them, but only from the outside. If the door was pushed shut with you inside, there was no way back out. I discovered this myself on more than one occasion. The door on my side ran along my room and along one wall in my sister's room, and hers ran along the other side along my room. This space was not very big. You had to crouch to stand in it, and most of the time you were in there, you had to be crawling on your hands and knees. Anyways, this one morning I'm awakened to a familiar noise. Some sort of small creature rustling around in the crawl space on my sister's side. I could hear this because my bed was against the wall that ran along it. Not an unusual noise. Living in the countryside, we had mice almost constantly and pretty much had the run of the storage spaces, so no matter how many traps were put down. Thought nothing of it and got up and went off to begin my morning ritual of toast and television. The first odd thing I noticed was, while watching TV, I could hear movement upstairs. My sister's room was directly above the living room, so I assumed she'd just not gone to work that day for whatever reason and continued munching. Around an hour or two later, I went back upstairs and booted my PC. As I was waiting, I turned around to my open door and faced my sister's closed one and realized it was late in the day and she had yet to leave her room. An odd thing, since she normally parked up on the sofa in the living room on her days off and didn't move until our parents returned. We're not the most active family. I started to think that maybe she was at work and I'd imagined the noise from upstairs, but as I mused this, I noticed the crack of light at the bottom of her door as a shadow passed by it. Okay, so there's definitely somebody in there, so it must be her, right? I once again pushed it from my mind and went back to my PC. More time passed and the thought came back to me. Why would she be at home but not leave? She only has a small TV in her room and no books, so what she had been doing in there all day? I glanced back around and again saw a shadow under the door. She was still moving around in there, so what was up? I finally decided to go knock on her door. I knocked a few times and said her name. No answer. Weird, but maybe she had headphones or something on. I knocked a bit harder again and said her name again, but louder. No answer. Alright, I thought. Screw it. I'm just gonna go in, so I cracked the door open and peered around. I found an empty room. Nobody inside at all. Feeling slightly confused, but better that it was just my imagination, I stepped in properly and looked around and saw something that made me full on panic. Near the bottom of her little door leading to the crawl space, there was a small hole that the mice had made to get in and out of the bottom. Really small, but just big enough to fit half of your hand through. There, coming through that hole, were 4 fingers, holding the door shut from the inside. At first I thought, no, it can't be fingers. Don't be stupid. Until I watched them slowly creep back through the hole, into the crawl space. I lost my cool. Very quietly though, I might add. I backed out of the room, shutting the door behind me, and ran to my room. Being the stupid teenager that I was, I grabbed what might be the most imposing weapon I could find. The fake Winchester rifle cap gun I got from Disneyland a few years previous. I figured that if whoever was hiding in that bedroom didn't believe it was a real firearm, I could at least hit them with it. I ran off downstairs to where my dogs were on the far side of the house and called my mom, who worked about a 5-minute drive from our house. She told me to stay put and that her and her manager were on their way. In this time, I made a small upgrade from fake plastic rifle to one of my dad's golf clubs. I felt much better with that. Finally, my mom and her boss, John, turn up and I tell them everything leading up to this point. They say okay, and we all set off upstairs to investigate. Me, rather unheroically, bringing up the rear with my golf club. I get into my sister's room and I point to the door. I'll never know if my mom is just hard as nails or massively stupid, but while John and I watch, she marches over to the door, yanks it open, and sticks her head in. A moment passes while she looks left and right, and John and I are preparing to yank her back from the clutches of the psycho hobo, murderer hiding in there, before she shouts, "Chris, what the heck are you doing in there? Get out." Small amount of backstory. Chris was my sister's boyfriend. Unbeknownst to me, the night before my dad had asked Chris to leave as he had stayed with us for around 5 days at this point. He said, "Yep, that's cool," and as far as mom and dad knew, he'd headed home. What really happened was instead of leaving, him and my sister had planned to make it seem like he'd left, then he could stay another night. He then would wake up before my mom shouted my sister up for work like she did every morning and would hide in the crawl space and sleep there until everybody had left for the day. One small hitch in the plan that they did not think of was, you guessed it, me. They'd forgotten I was home and conveniently sat directly opposite the only exit for most of the day, so he was trapped. When I knocked, he hid himself behind the door and held it shut to prevent being locked in. Anyways, my mom swiftly told him to get the heck out and not come back. Sadly, this was not the last time we saw that guy, as it turned around he'd stolen quite a bit of money from my sister's room while he'd been hiding out, and then because my sister makes terrible decisions, got her pregnant and proceeded to smash windows, trying to get at her and the baby around a year later. For a while, we lived in the same city when I went to uni, and he was spending time at the prison there for stabbing someone in a completely different town. A super guy. Oh, and a small topper to all of this, as I mentioned earlier, the only rooms upstairs are mine and my sister's bedrooms. He'd been in there for close to 14 hours with no access to a toilet, but no worry for this guy because he had lots of empty bottles to piss in, which he kindly left behind for us to clean up. And finally, around a year later, as mom was getting the Christmas decorations out, which were at the far back of the storage space, she found a small bag filled with feces. I should mention, where she found it is exactly next to where my bed is on the other side of the wall. The rustling that woke me up that day, it was him, taking a poop amongst our tinsel and tree. So, sister's baby daddy, who hid in our crawl space and used it as a private bathroom, let's not meet, yeah? This happened to me 2 to 3 years ago. I was around 23 at the time. I am a female and I live in Romania. One night I was coming home from class. Masters. Classes start after 6 p.m. and end at 10 p.m. or around 11 p.m. I had to take the subway for about 12 stops. The destination I had to get off at was the end of the line for the subway. At that time, there wouldn't be many people in the subway. I'm a pretty lonely person. All I need is my headset and my music and I'm good to go. Said and done. I plug in my music, pick the furthest chair in the subway, away from the only 2 people that were taking the subway with me at the time. So far so good, until I see with the corner of my eye, a silhouette approaching me and sitting right next to me. It was a man, fairly built, dark hair, wearing glasses, a black shirt with a black hoodie and a sickening smile. He doesn't engage in talking with me, but would just stare at my phone as I would browse through my music. I can hear him breathing heavily. Not like painfully, but still like he was feeling something very strong. I feel uneasy, so I decide to change my seat and go even further behind, trying to avoid him without looking like a freak myself. I don't know to who. There was just another person with us the whole way. I guess that kind of scared me even more. I pick a new chair, sit down, plug my headset again, and proceed with the remaining 6 to 12 stops on my way home. I see the silhouette growing bigger and bigger and a breeze running on my skin as I realize the guy is again sitting right next to me. Glancing in midair, dead eyes, a big smile, staring right into my phone. I panic. There are still 4 stops to go. I have nowhere to hide. I look after the other person in the subway trying to sit next to her, thinking that strength comes in numbers. She is no longer there. I start shaking a bit, but not allowing the creeper to notice me being vulnerable. I stand up, go to the door, and just decide to stand until my stop comes. This way he won't sit next to me, right? Well, he comes straight after me and sits on the chair right near the door, and because he couldn't see my phone, on which he was so focused so far, from that angle, he fixates me right in my soul with his black dead eyes and says, "Hi, gorgeous. Why are you avoiding me?" I'm freaking out as I look at my phone trying to call my boyfriend or message him, and he stops me by saying, "I know nobody will help you. You would have sent an SOS message by now, and I know you didn't." That moment I realize I am cornered. He has been focusing on my phone to see who I was talking to, trying to figure out if I panicked, trying to see if I would ask someone for help. He had me cornered pretty bad. I had the luck to reach my stop, as I would delay any reaction or ignore him so that he would repeat whatever he wanted to say. I drop off and run for the exit, not looking back. I get out at the surface and I don't see him anymore. This moment I put my phone in my purse and realize I had pepper spray with me all along. My heartbeat comes back to normal, as I know at least I have something to defend myself with, but still a long way to get home, and who knows if he is alone or not. I walk rather fast for maybe 5 minutes from the metro and feel a hand grabbing my wrist hard and pulling me back. Another hand covering my mouth, disabling me from screaming my lungs out. It was him. The same black hoodie, dark hair, and dead-eyed stalker. He was furious and said, "Running from me? How dare you run away from me? You should be honored. I give you attention. I am fairly built for a woman, 80 kilograms and 1.75 meters tall, so I guess he thought men don't find me beautiful or something and should feel blessed that a creep like him stalks me and tried to hurt me. Now, my phone is in my bag. I can't call the police. I can't reach for the pepper spray. I panic. Can't punch him in the crotch. I can't scratch him as I don't have long nails. His hand is still in my mouth. What do I do? Did the most desperate and disgusting thing I could think of just to save my life. I played along. I used my other hand to touch the inside of his thigh and mumble off, "I'm sorry," while his hand was still on my mouth. He took his hand off and I repeated that I'm sorry. Didn't realize he was just flirting. He let his guard down and took his hand off my wrist. He asked me for my phone number and address to drop me off, but I refused, saying I'd rather add him on Facebook, and he agreed. I told him I'd reach for my phone, but instead picked the pepper spray and got him all over his face. Made tread cover both his eyes, nose, mouth, even his ears and hands. He instantly got all red, suffocating from the pepper and swelling. I called the police, told them what happened and what I did. They asked me if he is immobilized, and I said yes, as the effect wears off in like 45 minutes. Police arrived there 5 minutes later to see me shaking like a leaf and a man on the ground swollen like a pumpkin, throwing up and swearing at me between gasps of breath. He was arrested, and the police told me they had been looking for him for the past week, as they discovered the body of a 24-year-old woman in his apartment, with red hair. I have red hair too. The woman was his girlfriend, and ever since, he's never gotten back to his apartment. I don't know what he wanted to do with me. I can understand why he targeted me due to the similarities, but a stranger in the subway stalking women at midnight, trying to befriend them, or worse, murder them. I really hope I never meet you again. First, a little bit of background. I teach first grade in a high poverty area. This is rough territory with lots of gangs, hard drugs, and prostitution. Just a couple of years ago, the police arrested a woman and several men. The mom had pimped her 2 special needs daughters to the men for money to buy drugs. Obviously, you get the idea. This is not a good area to be alone in, especially after dark. Anyways, it was early September and I had a new student, named Grace. She was very timid, had low self-confidence, and always seemed very nervous. I kept a very close watch on her because I know these can be warning signs of abuse. One Monday, as I took my class outside to play, I noticed strange-looking marks on Grace's legs. Little round indentations marched from her calves to her thighs. She was in shorts. The spots were red and looked painful. I thought she might have some kind of skin rash, so I asked her how she got the marks. Grace told me in a nonchalant way that I was being bad after school on Friday, so Daddy had to take the brush to me again. I was dumbfounded and honestly a little bit confused. A brush? Then I understood. Her father had beaten her with a bristle brush hard enough to leave indentations on her skin 2 days later. Now, I'm a mandated reporter and I take this seriously. I called CPS and they were there that afternoon to talk to Grace and photograph her injuries. At that point, I am out of the picture and CPS takes over. I don't get updates on the situation, so I had no idea what happened. Grace never returned to school, but her father did. He showed up one evening as I was preparing to leave the school. About 5:30, parked his truck in such a way that I could not move my car, then jumped out carrying a baseball bat. He screamed all kind of things at me about how I terrified his daughter because she was in custody, how I was a nosy bitch who didn't know my damn place, and how now he was going to show me exactly what I deserved. He meant it too. The man had the cold eyes of a fish, and I knew if he could, he would do serious harm to me. I didn't know what to do. Couldn't run from him. He was massive and had at least 100 pounds on me. All muscle. If I locked myself in my car, I'd be a sitting duck while he smashed the windows in with the bat. So I said goodbye to my dignity and started screaming for help. Now, I'm petite, but years of teaching have given me the lung power of a megaphone, and I can be pretty loud. People across the street heard me and came out to see what was happening. The great part of working in a small community is that you know everyone and they know you, especially if you are a teacher. A couple fathers of former students came over to help while the nearby woman dialed 911. He never did calm down and kept screaming about all the things he was going to do to me for turning him into CPS. Even when the police arrived, he continued his tirade. They arrested him, but I'm not sure what the charges were. I don't think they can get him for assault since he never touched me. For the rest of the school year, I had an armed escort to my car after school. Again, small community and our police are wonderful people. Interestingly enough, I had somebody from one of the local gangs tell me that we're keeping a watch because I had taught his little sister earlier and she liked me. That was a surreal moment, let me tell you. I went to the police station a few days ago to put down a complaint about some person who scammed me when I was trying to get a graphics card. A guy who seems nice overheard the conversation and proposed me to come over as he had spares electronic equipment that he did not use anymore, saying that if it could help someone else, he'd be glad to give it out. Now, I didn't really put any hope into it, as it wasn't likely that I'd find something interesting, but I took up the offer. He didn't have that fishy person aura, so I accepted coming over in a few days. I wouldn't show up alone though, just in case. A few days after, I go to the house with my brother. First, the guy is not wearing a mask and tries to shake my hand. There's this old person in the background watching us, beer in hand. I can see from here that the yard is a complete mess, things everywhere. He guides us inside and we take a look around, and then he starts pulling stuff out of a bag, and it's like 15 to 20 years old of a graphics card that are completely worthless. So I told him it ain't gonna work, it was too old. He tells us to follow him to the garage, which is even more of a mess than the yard. Things laying everywhere, and there's a very dirty pool, not even covered, although we are still in winter. He shows us one of the first generation of graphics cards. Old and bulky. I tell him it's not going to work either, and he takes us to a shed behind the house with even more stuff. A very shady place in a weird alley, and freaked out a little bit because the older person, who hadn't said a single word, was following us. He rumbles through his shed, telling me the card he intended to give me was somewhere, but he can't find it. Too bad. I prepare to go away, but then he asks me if we could look at a PC that doesn't boot. I accept and go inside the room, which is apparently the kids' room and is as messy as every other room. I approach the computer and it's missing keys. It's kind of dirty everywhere. I sit down with my brother and starts fiddling with the computer. The grandpa appears out of nowhere and sits behind my brother, which kind of freaks me out more by the way he looks at us. I'm trying to fix the PC. And as I'm doing so, the mother comes in and tells me that she doesn't know much about computers and such, but that she goes on the dark web. She asks me if I can check every device in the house to make sure they haven't been pirated and that she's being spied on. At that point, I look at my brother, confused, and we kind of mentally communicate, yeah, we need to get out, it's starting to get weird. I tell the guy that I can't seem to fix it and that it's above what I know, and he's okay with it. The old man lights up a cigarette in the room and we get out of there. The guy keeps us and talks for like 5 minutes. They seemed like they wanted us to stay. We tell them that we have a bus to catch and kind of walk quickly out of here. The mother stops us and asks if we're going to come back to inspect if their devices are pirated, and I just say that we'll contact them again. Panicked and blocked the number when I got out of there. In case you don't realize, when I say well-meaning, I'm being sarcastic. I haven't thought about this happening in years. I was 13 or 14 at the time. I'm 26 now. Let's start with a little bit of backstory. I was adopted by my paternal grandmother. She has a bit of an old-fashioned idea on how young people should meet or date, usually set up by parents or meeting at church. I call her mom as she had me my entire life. For what I'm about to describe, I don't blame her. She was bamboozled. Mom and I were close with a family that lived a short walk from us in the same apartment complex. In this family, living in their home were a grandmother, mother, and her 2 young sons that I sometimes babysat. We became close because Mom was a seamstress and she did some sewing for the mother. The boys took an instant liking to me and all of us hit it off. My mom and the grandmother were close in age, both Southern, and seemed to have similar viewpoints on things, such as aforementioned topics, so they spoke on the phone often. One day, when the mother and her sons are out, the mom and I are at home cooking and the grandma calls the house. She asked if I wouldn't mind coming over to cheer up her grandson. He was upset and rattled because his brother recently passed away. Mom asked all the questions you'd expect of a stereotypical old-fashioned matriarch. Will you, the grandma, be there the whole time? How long will you keep her there? How old is your grandson? Of course, all the answers were favorable, or else she would have flat out said no, but she was told that the grandma would be watching us, that I didn't have to stay long, and that this boy was only a couple of years older than me. Mom said I should go. It would be nice of me to do something kind for a person with a broken heart. I agreed because we recently had a death in the family. I wanted to help. I said I would go. While the grandma was still on the phone, she said, "Who knows Lulu Loopy? I may have just set you up with a nice boyfriend." On the other end of the phone, the grandma said, "I hope so." The distance between our apartments. Mom could watch me walk all the way to their place. She stood in the door watching. The grandma stood in her door also watching. I went there, and after the 2 of them waved to one another, the grandma closed the door behind me, closed the blinds, and fluffed my hair. I always had messy bangs, and she seemed determined to fix them. My mom always did the same whenever my hair got messy. I assumed it was one of their old lady things, thinking that a girl should always be tidy, so I didn't think anything of it. In these apartments, we had furnished basements. In ours, it had been turned to a play area and office, and in theirs, a TV or video game room. She took me down the stairs. I assumed this teenage boy was playing video games. Imagine my surprise when this boy turned out to be a man who looked like he could have been the same age as my dad. My dad was about 34 at this point in my life. Kind of froze, not sure what to say or think. The grandma introduced us. She kept trying to draw his attention to me. Isn't she pretty? Look at all of her freckles. She's got pretty eyes. She pulled me onto the couch and made me sit down. She said that she had some phone calls to make, so she was leaving us there. The grandma ascended the stairs and closed the door, and I was scared she may have locked it. I realized she lied to my mom. She wasn't going to watch us, nor was this guy only a few years older than me. Once she was gone, he became agitated, wringing his hands, pacing, and speaking in garbled phrases. He was sweating when he looked at me. I tried not to panic. I wanted to run, but was thinking that girls who run in horror movies all die, so I sat still and let him pace. He sat on the couch and started rocking. I tried talking to him, but it didn't take me long to realize he had some sort of developmental disability. I realized he wasn't dangerous, just very uncomfortable with the female stranger, and it was probably likely he didn't realize my age. I turned a music station on the TV and he calmed down and began singing along. Eventually, he fell asleep on the opposite end of the couch. Maybe an hour or so later, the grandma came to check on us. I smiled and said, "Thanks for having me, but I have chores to do. I should get back home to my mom." The grandma agreed after telling me to come back and visit her grandson sometime again, walked me to the door. I walked back to our apartment and hurried inside, locking the door behind me. Mom was startled. They usually called before I left their house. She looked at me and asked if the boy and I got along. "That was not a boy," I blurted instantly. She asked what happened and I said, "He's old enough to be one of your biological kids." I have never seen such a look in her eyes. I'm sure she would have murdered that woman if she could have. She sat me down and made me relay everything to her. She asked repeatedly if he touched me and even looked over for what I suspect is evidence of sexual assault, even asking to smell my breath. She asked one final time if I was sure he didn't touch me and if I wanted to go to the doctor or police. I said no. I don't think that young man had anything to do with it. From his reaction, I don't even think he knew she invited me over. Mom gave me a big bowl of ice cream and stayed close to me for the rest of the evening as if she were afraid I was going to be taken away from her. The next morning, I heard her on the phone yelling. I guess she called the grandma and gave her an earful. I don't know what she said, but I never saw anybody in that family again. I don't know if Mom was making sure we avoided them or if they were trying to avoid us. I suspect it's the latter. My mom is very scary when angry. So, Grandma who put your friend's daughter in a situation where she could have been abused, let's not meet again. For your sake, my mom might end you. I have this thing that I do. It's simply called drinking way too much tea. Like to the point where I actually have a whole cupboard stuffed with jars filled with loose leaf tea, and I have at least 3 boxes of tea bags kept in my room for when I don't want to get up and make a new pot all the time. It's gotten to the point that when I go into a local tea shop, the staff greet me and ask if I like more of their black blood orange tea or perhaps their green dragon mix, which I tend to buy often. Even the staff at the local supermarket recognize me by now because I always buy the same boxes of tea bags. This became a problem about a year ago. They hired a new guy at the local tea shop. Let's call him Tom. He seemed like a nice guy, very enthusiastic about things and seemed to fit in well with the staff. He was helpful and he got familiar with their stock really fast. He actually introduced me to some of their own tea, a mix they called Sea Breeze. I didn't think twice about talking to him, because I talked to everybody else in that shop, and I've been going there for years. Not to mention that it was the only town around for miles that even had a tea shop of its own. Besides, Tom was really nice. After about 2 months, he asked me out though. It came sort of out of the blue, especially considering that we didn't know each other. I told him I wasn't interested in that and that I recently come out of a pretty bad breakup and just didn't want to date anyone for a while. He seemed to take it fine. Just said, "Yeah, I get that," and dropped it. At least I thought he dropped it. Maybe a week after that, I came to the supermarket to get some more tea bags. I didn't pay much attention to anything. I just dropped it by the cashiers and grabbed my wallet. When I was about to take my card out to pay, I suddenly heard a very familiar voice laugh and say, "Hey you, Lady Grey, right? You love that blend." Tom was sitting there dressed in the uniform of the staff. I got a little thrown off, seeing as how the supermarket hardly ever hired anyone new. Believe me, I'd asked many times while looking for a job. "Didn't know you worked there," I told him, and he smiled at me. "Yeah, I got a job here just the other day. Apparently one of their staff up and quit, so they need someone. And, well, I have a friend of a friend." I didn't ask more about it. This went on for a while, seeing Tom at both the tea shop and the supermarket. When it came to the latter, though, I always seemed to arrive just as his shift was almost up, and he would ask if he could walk with me for a bit. I always told him that it wasn't a good idea because I had quite a long way home and he normally got around by car. Whenever he would ask this, I always got a weird feeling. You know when there's this one person who you feel pretty indifferent about, but whenever they ask something like this, you feel like you have to make an excuse to get away? That's it. For all that, it was fine to talk to Tom. Something made me think I shouldn't walk anywhere with him though. I lied when I said I had a long way to go. Truth be told, I live maybe 10 minutes from the supermarket, but it's a little out of the way in a secluded area of the town where few people live. Lots of abandoned houses, and the apartment building where I live is pretty much the epitome of there's no one there to help, or rather, nobody who would even care to help. Besides being a pretty small girl, around 1.58 centimeters, albeit one who works out and has a good deal of muscle, I wasn't really comfortable with the thought of being in a secluded place with anybody bigger than me. Little by little, I could tell that Tom was getting frustrated about me saying no all the time. He'd get this pinched look on his face, and he'd use a very flat voice when saying, "Yeah, that's fine." When I come to the tea shop, he'd ask his boss if he could have a short break just so he could chat with me for a bit. And this had been going on for a while. His boss at the tea shop once took me aside when he wasn't at work and asked for a word. She started asking me if Tom was a bother to me and if he'd been doing anything untoward, so to say. I admitted that he made me uncomfortable when he asked to be alone with me. "You are the only customer he does this with," she told me. "He seems really indifferent to anyone else. I mean, yeah, he helps them, but he doesn't get so enthusiastic about them." This started setting off proper warning bells in my head, and I asked her if perhaps I could know when he actually worked so I could come in when he wasn't there. I wasn't about to stop going there just because of him. She agreed and gave me a schedule, even her own phone number so I could call her if something was up. Let me tell you, Tom got really irritated when he didn't see me at the tea shop anymore. If I went to the supermarket, he would be pushy about asking me where I was and why I wasn't there. "You go like every week," he'd say. "How come I never see you?" I pulled some BS story about my routine needing a change and how my work hours didn't work with the old one anymore, and I could tell he didn't believe me. So about another month went by. He kept asking why he didn't see me more often and why I wouldn't take a walk with him. Then one morning, I got a letter in the mail. Just the wording alone told me it was him, though the content itself was pretty obvious. "You are such a liar. Your routine needed a change. Your work hours didn't fit. You always lied to me. You work from home and you told me that. You work from home and you go get tea whenever. I saw you, you know. I was in my car outside the tea shop and you showed up when I wasn't working. Why are you avoiding me? Aren't I nice to you? I thought girls liked that when guys are actually nice to them. Guess you're just another little bitch who wants bad boys or whatever." Okay, that was out of line. Still, can't you just come in as you used to? I just want to talk, and why not walk a little bit with me? I can always just walk back to my car, you know. Maybe I could give you a ride home. Not like I don't know where you live anyway. I like talking to you. You pay attention and you listen. Just give me a chance, yeah? You can't still be hung up on your ex. It's been ages. If you're going to move on from an asshole, move on with a nice guy. I would like to say that I freaked out and made a fuss, but I didn't. I just picked up the phone, called the owner of the tea shop, and explained about Tom in the letter. The owner stated that he had stopped coming into work lately altogether and that she was going to fire him at any rate. This was just the nail in the coffin. She promised that she was going to talk to him about it and tell him that he was lucky I hadn't called the police yet. Well, she did, and it didn't stop. I kept getting letters. When I saw him at the supermarket, he would be agitated, and he would try harder than before to get me to walk with him. Once it even got to the point where he grabbed my arm and tried to convince me to just come with him to let him show me something. Luckily, at that point, there were security guards around, and they went over to us and asked me if there was a problem. I only had to look at Tom to make him let go. I think he knew that if he kept going or tried to claim that we knew each other well, I would tell them. Then came that last night when I'd been to the supermarket pretty late. I'd been wrapped up in work for a few days and hadn't had time to go to the shop, so I ran down to the supermarket to pick up food and other necessities that I was missing. And Tom was there, not working, but just waiting for me when I came out with heavy bags in my arms. He didn't approach. I just passed him by, hoping to convey that I was in a hurry, and headed out. I'd gotten maybe halfway home when I looked over my shoulder and saw his car stop just around the corner. Convinced now that he was following me and hoping to catch me alone, I decided to take a shortcut home. There's a path that cuts through the forested area around where I live, and it's a very narrow one. Difficult to walk along with shopping bags, but at least it would let me get out of sight for a bit. I hurried around the next corner, listening for the sound of the car as it started up again, and dodged into the forest. I crouched down behind a bush for a while, and I heard the car drive up and down the road several times. I'll admit that I felt triumphant that such a small thing could throw him off. He apparently didn't know where I went. The path is pretty hard to see if you don't know where it is, so perhaps he was unaware of its existence as well. After a bit, I got up and hurried along. Getting home wasn't very difficult at all, and I thought it was over and done with. But when I got inside and went up the stairs, I looked out through one of the windows in the stairwell. His car was just coming up the road towards my house. I ran as best as I could up the stairs and hurried into my flat and slammed the door. Now I was truly freaked out. It was easy enough to deal with it before. Letters could be shredded or burnt, and the shops were always manned with staff for security. But this was entirely different. Now he was at my house. I had locked the door behind me, and while I was unpacking the groceries, I heard the handle being turned and the door being pulled at. I didn't react much. The lock was new and the door was sturdy, so nobody could get in unless I opened the door for them. There was just one problem: the mail slot. I heard it squeak as it was pushed open, and I heard his voice. "What are you running from? It's just me." I didn't answer. I stood still in the kitchen and listened. There were continuous scratching noises coming from the door now, and he kept talking, telling me that he wasn't going to do anything bad, that he just wanted to see me. The longer I just stood there and did nothing, the more aggressive he got. It sounded like he was trying to kick the door down, all the while shouting about how I was a bitch, how unfair I was being to him, and how I got him fired. The last one, yeah, fair enough. The rest, not so much. Then the noise just abruptly stopped. I thought for a moment that maybe a neighbor had gone out into the stairwell to tell him to shut the heck up and leave. I waited a while longer, just standing there and listening intently, until I finally managed to relax and move again. I moved towards the hallway, hoping that I was moving really quietly to go to my little office. I was right in front of the door when the mail slot squeaked open again and a hand dropped something in through it. It was a burning cloth, and I could smell the stench of gasoline. I began screaming and ran to fetch water to put the fire out, and as I did, I heard Tom laughing outside my door. "I knew you were in there." Though I managed to put the fire out, he wasn't leaving. Called the police, but they told me that there was no patrol available to help. The fastest they could get to me was in 2 hours. I was stuck there in my flat with this creep outside my door, shouting threats and abuse at me for 2 hours. All this while none of my neighbors came to help. When the police did arrive, they arrested Tom. Apparently, there had been several more calls from my neighbors. The reason they didn't come to help was that they were worried that he was armed somehow. And well, can't blame them. I was later told that the police did find a machete in Tom's car, as well as 3 cans of gasoline and a lot of matches. He could have gone at any point to fetch any of these. But there's more. It turns out that the only reason Tom was ever hired by anyone was that he used a fake name. Technically, he didn't exist, hence why no one ever found anything criminal about him. But the police found him in their database eventually. He had done this in another town to another girl. She wasn't quite so lucky. He'd been to jail for what he'd done to her, but gotten out early on good behavior. I don't know the full details of the other incident, but I know that she lived though. When she was found, she was so badly burnt that she was unrecognizable. So this was about 5 months ago. I don't remember it with complete clarity, and I'm not the best at storytelling events from my life, but bear with me. I'll do my best. This was about 2 a.m. in downtown Denver. A friend of ours hosts a D&D session every Sunday. I and my partner normally stay the night, but we had plans the next Monday and had to go early. We said our goodbyes to everybody, grab our bags, and head out. It wasn't a long walk at all to the car, not even a block away. I and my SO started walking and chatting about the session. Then we both got silent at the same time. Somebody was behind us. I don't know how, but we both knew he was going to be bad news. He continued to follow us to the parking garage, and right before we entered, he spoke up with, "Are you ladies 18 or older?" Now, I'm a bigger girl, 5'10", and more than know how to hold my own against creeps. This guy struck me as different. He was a good foot taller than me, a blonde, blue-eyed male with one heck of a disgusting smile. Me being the dumb, polite person I am, I said something like, yes, why? And he proceeded to start saying things. "Well, do you pay your taxes?" With a quick response of, "Sorry, we aren't really at that stage of our lives yet." He quickly responds with a long rant about how taxes are terrible and you should never pay them. "They're using our taxes to kill people all the time," he said. "The government is killing people. Everyone is killing people, and they get away with it too easily." At this point, he begins to move closer and closer. My partner is backing up into the garage, and my dumbass is too scared to move, just trying to keep him focused on me rather than her. She gets within a few inches of my face. I try to casually step back, keep my movements looking natural, and straighten my back out. compensating for the fact that this person is larger than me. His breath was horrid. You could smell the alcohol with every single word that came out of his mouth, and his blue wristband was still on. I don't know if that's a bar thing. All I know is he had one. He continues on with his rant. My SO tries to argue back a bit. He starts to move away from me towards her. After a few glances between me and her, we catch on that we need to just go with whatever this guy says. When she stops arguing, his rant goes from taxes to political figures and genocide. You know, I could kill anyone I want and get away with it. Anyone can. The government is watching, but they don't care. They'll never know. His words were not making sense at all. We are killing this planet, and it could be solved if we had less of a population, he said. Mind you, this guy was staying as close as possible. If either of us went out on our phones or our watches, he'd shift to them. Not to compliment him, but he was really perceptive for somebody I assume was drunk out of their mind. The conversation continues for about 5, maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. I feel disgusted with myself for it, but I'm agreeing with everything he's saying. At one point, he seemed to completely forget about my SO. I introduced myself using my character name and shake his hand, which allowed me to see a bunch of track marks on his arm. I'm freaking out on the inside, thinking I'm going to get stabbed today. I've never even been in a fight. How the heck do I handle this? All the while smiling and agreeing. Then his behavior shifts. Still staying way too close to me, he starts scratching himself all over, reaching into his left pocket over and over every time he says kill or references. Honestly, at this point, I was more mad than scared and started trying to work around him, as stepping back was just leading me to a wall. It wasn't working no matter how hard I tried to walk or where I tried to go. He was always right there in my face, talking about killing anyone he wanted and saying that it would solve the world's problems if people just went out and killed hundreds of others. I got fed up with it, stepped to my right, then quickly to his left, and backed up straight out the garage. He followed, so did my partner behind him. We were finally out in the open again. I sent so many desperate looks to people walking by as he kept getting more and more pushy and ever closer to me. So much so that he was almost chest to chest with me. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed my SO's arm. Missed it by a long shot, she said. What? I mustered the best smile. I possibly could, and said, I just want to hold your hand. As a gay person with a few homophobic and crazy people encounters, this was my worst idea ever. She handed me her hand though. I pulled her by me, and this man that seemed like a huge threat backed up so quickly, saying, Oh, you two are together. Yeah, no, I'm cool with that. Have a great night. This boy, who had been doing whatever he was doing, turned tail because we were gay. The one time my sexuality has probably saved me rather than put me in danger. We waited until he was far up the straight, and then went straight to the car. The second we got in, we locked the doors and drove off. I was shaking the whole car ride home. We actually passed him later down the road. He and I made direct eye contact. A few days ago, I was sitting on the floor in the subway station, waiting for the next train and charging my phone on the wall outlet. I'd been there for maybe 15 minutes watching the trains go by and doodling on my phone. I look up from my phone to see an average-looking late teenage man staring at me with doe eyes. You're beautiful, he says. Gee, thanks, I mutter, unplugging my phone. He leans over. Nice boots you got there. May I take a closer look? The guy doesn't seem threatening, and the platform is filling with people, so I don't feel like I'm in danger. Maybe he's interested in shoes. Sure, take a look, I almost say, but he's already kneeling and touching the material. He looks at me all excited. Is this real leather? No, it's synthetic. They're from a discount chain, so probably not. He looks slightly disappointed and straightens himself. Well, are you in the market to buy new boots anytime soon? He says in a monotone voice. Nope, I already have one pair. But it's good to have a collection. What? I can't really afford to buy another, to be honest. I say, standing up. A lady standing next to me is looking at me, but when I mouth help, she looks away and blushes. I didn't mean right now. I mean down the line, the man says. He rummages through his backpack and pulls out a crumpled women's fashion catalog for Zellers. He turns to a dog-eared page that lists various styles of women's boots. Would you ever consider wearing something like these? Those aren't really my style, I say. What the heck, is this guy a sales rep or something? Oh, He puts away the catalog. I look at his shoes, which are black orthopedic shoes that only a mom could buy. What's your style? I ask jokingly. Maybe he will talk about himself and I can sneak out of this conversation. Nope. I like when women wear these kind of boots, he said. They look seductive in them. Nope, not a sales rep, just a fetishist. Awesome. The man pulls out his phone, he goes to his photos and starts scrolling through them. Lots of famous women wear these boots, he says. Do you know who this is? He shows me a paparazzi picture of Lindsay Lohan. He continues to scroll through pictures of female celebrities all wearing thigh-high ruched boots. You won't know who this woman is, but this is JoJo. Oh, I know JoJo. She sang Too Little Too Late, right? I ask. The man looks at me funny. I don't know what she does, but she wears the boots. That's all that matters, he said. He scrolls to a picture of Katy Perry. I bet you know who this is. He zooms in on her boots, then zooms out and slowly zooms in on her boobs. Yeah, everyone loves Katy Perry, he said. Wow, you're really into boots, I comment. Well, it was nice to meet you. Randy. He extends his hand out for a dead fish handshake. And you are. Insert fake name here. Great. Let's ride the subway together. Heck no. Oh wait, I say. Is this the southbound platform? Randy informs me it's the northbound platform. Oh dang, I'm on the wrong one. Better go get to the other side. Bye. I step backward and wave at him as people are rushing into the train. But when the doors close, Randy is still there. It's okay, I'll take the next one. What's your age? No, playtime's over. I don't want to tell you how old I am, Randy. I don't know you. I don't even know how old you are. I'm 26, he said. You don't have to be ashamed of being really old. I don't mind with being older women. Or younger. Even if you're 17, it's okay. At this point in my head, I'm just thinking, someone please help me. Wait a second. Specialized, obsessive interest. Oversharing his private information. No sense of personal boundaries or social graces. This can only mean one thing. The poor guy, I think. Maybe he doesn't know that what he's doing is socially unacceptable. This can be a learning moment. Well, I'll tell him. You know, Randy, many women don't like to be asked these types of questions by strangers on the subway. Oh yeah. I know you're not dangerous, but I think I know what your intentions are, and I don't like when men talk to me of sexual intentions. Randy looked like a deer in the headlights. I know that, he said sheepishly. People tell me that when I meet ladies, but I figured I should try. Sorry, try to do what? Try to tell me about your freaking foot fetish and expect me to help you fulfill your desires? Try to get me to have sex with you? No. Screw you. Nobody who approaches any stranger gets to do that. But I held my tongue. It was brave of you to try. I say with gritted teeth. But Randy, I don't appreciate being asked these questions. Oh, okay. He said. I'm going to go over to the southbound platform now, and you're going to stay here and get on the next train, alright? Yeah, okay, I guess. He mumbled and shuffled his feet. Goodbye, Randy. He perked up suddenly. Okay, it was nice to meet you, he chirped. Maybe we will run into each other someday. Fat chance, asshole. I'm thinking. I run up the escalator, but instead of going to the southbound platform, I head down the tunnel to the westbound and eastbound trains. All the while fuming that I have to further detour my trip home, just so I can get away from him. Lack of social cues can be damned. He knew he was being creepy and decided to keep doing it anyway. So, he's a creep. So that's why when I looked over my shoulder and saw Randy running up the escalator after me, I booked it down the tunnel and ran to the first westbound train. I got off at the next stop and hid behind some trash cans for 15 minutes, before deciding it was finally safe. Guess I can't wear my favorite boots anymore. When I was around 7 years old, my parents would take me to a local grocery store and always ignore my complaints about how boring the trip was. Since there was nothing that caught my eye during these trips, I would always sit in those grocery carts and play with toys I brought from home, while my parents went to different aisles to gather all the groceries they needed. Obviously, it was not a smart idea to leave your 7-year-old alone in a grocery cart in the first place, but I was a very obedient child, and that part of town had a very peaceful and friendly atmosphere to it. Having my parents out of sight made me anxious at first, but I slowly grew accustomed to it once I realized that they would always come back to the cart after a few minutes. I just had to wait patiently. One day, my parents left me on the cart and didn't come back for quite a while. Now this would usually be the time when I would call, or I guess in my case, loudly proclaim how hungry I am, for my parents to come back. But my parents bought me a Game Boy Advance a few days back, so I was too engrossed in whatever I was playing to even realize how many minutes passed. While I was waiting for my parents, a woman who I'd never seen before seemed to notice that I was left alone for a while and decided to approach the cart. She lightly tapped my shoulder to get my attention away from my game, which jolted me out of my trance. When I looked up at the woman, her face immediately formed into a huge grin, but I could tell it wasn't genuine. She began to ask random questions and tried to keep a conversation, but I refused to speak. I was a very shy child and always hated talking to adults who are not my parents. "What's your name, sweetie?" Silence. "Aren't you bored sitting on that cart all alone?" More silence. "Where are your parents?" Crickets. I've never felt like I was in danger while the lady was talking my ear off, because there have been many times when my friends of parents who live around the area would spot the cart I was in, wait with me, and also try to make small talk with me, which never really worked out, until one of my parents got back, which would lead to another very boring hour or so in the middle of the grocery store. Anyways, the woman eventually gave up making small talk and began to push the cart and said, "Why don't we look for your parents together?" Again, I didn't say anything, since I assumed they were one of the million friends that my mother or father had. We were near the market doors until I noticed my father inside an aisle carrying a bunch of items. I called out to him and said something along the lines of, "Dad, your friend wants to see you." When my dad looked up to where I was, his face paled when he saw the situation I was in and just dropped everything he had in his arms and tried to rush over to the cart shouting my name. The woman at this point began freaking out and began to push the cart even faster. We were just out of the store and about halfway into the parking lot when she realized she couldn't outrun my dad if she kept on pushing the cart. In a complete panic, she let go of the cart and jumped into a car with a male driver before speeding off. It was obvious that she didn't give a shit about my safety. Now here I was at 7 years old in a shopping cart, screaming bloody murder as it rolled onto the street. I'm guessing there was a dent or something on the road, because the cart then fell onto its side, which gave me massive scrapes and bruises to the left side of my body. Seconds later, I heard my dad swearing and quickly picking me up off the road, cradling me into his arms as I continued walking. Cops were called and my dad gave a statement. Unfortunately, he couldn't get the license plate of the car because he saw me fall onto the street and ran full force towards me, not even realizing the woman escaped with her companion. I had to get a few minor stitches and had a limp for a few days, but other than that, I was okay. Needless to say, my parents never took me on their boring grocery trips ever again. This story took place last night at a bar outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. In the defense of my quote-unquote male masculinity, I do want to make it known that I had consumed a couple of drinks the night this all went down. I'd met up with a couple of friends while at the bar and ended up heading out at about midnight with 4 of my female friends and 1 of my male friends. A couple walked out shortly behind us and stayed with us most of the way through the parking lot. We had just made it to our vehicle when we heard the 2 ladies behind us scream from across the parking lot. I instinctively turned to see what was going on, only to see 3 males surrounding the 2, attempting to grab hold of the lot. I said something along the lines of, "Screw that," looked to my pal and infamously said, "We are going." A little insight. My buddy and I work overseas security contracting, not the Blackwater stuff or super duper top secret operations, mostly celebrities, high profile weddings, and the occasional auction. Neither of us are small guys. Both of us are pretty close to 6'1" and about 200 pounds. So we rushed over the parking lot, making a whole lot of noise and screaming profanities, mainly trying to get Bubba and his 2 cousins to concentrate on us instead. My buddy had a whole lot less to drink than me, I won't lie. He did some work. A couple of physical exchanges between the 5 of us, and the 3 boys were running off. The ladies were horrified but okay. We ended up calling our girlfriends an Uber and following the couple home. Bubba and his cousins followed us for a bit. Thankfully, a phone call to dispatch ended their pursuit and saw them arrested for DUI and assault. I just woke up and wanted to share this. Not as some heroic story or some BS like that, but as a reminder to take care of each other. We are not truly human if we do not. This list received a whole lot more attention than I expected. I do truly hope that this story will encourage others to stand up for your fellow women or woman. Thank you for all the support. Oh yeah, and the gentleman dubbed Bubba ended up having 3 prior charges against women. He's likely going away for a long time. Hi, I joined Reddit specifically to get this off my chest. It happened this time last year, and to this day every time I think about it, it gives me chills. So I want to start off by saying I still work for this company, and I still have anxiety every time I go into work. The company is huge, one of the biggest names in the world. For privacy purposes, I'm going to call it the Big Cheese or Big C. I also want to mention that I have crippling social anxiety, which I credit to being homeschooled most of my life, and this will make more sense later. Well, in September of last year, I was fresh out of high school and looking for work. I needed this job immediately because I was living with my SO and we were barely getting by. My father and my grandfather, they both either work or worked for this company for a long period of time, and it's something that garnered a lot of respect in the family. So of course, I was thrilled when I got my first interview. It went great and I was all set to start training, which involved a few classes and on-the-job training. The classes were awkward to say the least, but nonetheless informative. Well, after the classes, we had our first task: join a group of fellow trainees and tour the work environment. This is when I first met creepy coworker. He was in the very back of my group, seemed a little shy, and didn't really talk to the rest of the group unless he was trying to make an awkward joke to join in. At first, I kind of felt bad for him. He seemed harmless, but definitely awkward and out of the loop. Knowing as much as I did going into the company, I made the effort to inform him and keep him updated with what the trainers were asking of us. He just seemed so lost and confused. I thought I was doing a good thing by helping him out. Even my SO thought so at the time. The training went by without any hiccups, and soon we were given the location of where we would start out. Ironically enough, the only person that I'd gotten to know, creepy coworker, had the same area I did. Realizing that we would start out together and both didn't know anyone, we decided to exchange phone numbers. This was so that we could both meet up the next week, starting day so we couldn't get lost. I thought nothing of this when he asked for my number and just assumed it was more because he was nervous and didn't know anyone beside me. Boy, did I live to regret that. The first day of training, we met up at a basically flagpole so that we could wait for our on-the-job trainer, Christy. When he got off the employee shuttle, he started texting me asking where I was. I was in the smoking section a little ways away, killing my fears with a cigarette. I texted back telling him where I was, and he asked if he could join. I didn't like how nervous I felt, so I wasn't very comfortable with anybody joining me during this time of reprieve. But I saw him coming over anyway, so I scooted over to make some room on the bench. That didn't matter because apparently he was going to sit as close to me as possible anyway. I hate touch or people being in my personal bubble. Being a victim of other trauma, touch was something only people very close to me had permission to do. The creepy coworker then proceeded to ask me if he could bum a cigarette, and I'm not good at saying no, so I gave him one. After he lit up, he handed me my lighter that I didn't even notice he took from the top of my bag back to me. Again, I kind of just ignored the unwarranted invasion of my space. We talked since we had about 30 minutes to kill, like normal stuff, like how do you feel about the company or where do you want to end up in it. I noticed he was wearing tattoo covering sleeves, and so I asked him about his tattoos. He pulled down the sleeves and started going almost each and every one, all something to do with either a love interest or something geeky. I listened out of mild curiosity, but quickly got uncomfortable when he started pulling out his phone to show me pictures of ones he drew. I was uncomfortable because he kept showing me pictures of himself as well, mostly photos of him shirtless, and I didn't really find that appropriate. He mentioned he was a Marine and that he had gained too much weight after his last tour. I apologized out of sympathy, but suggested that it was nothing to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, after that, he kept smiling at me in a way I deemed to be admiration. I had seen this look from my fiancé, so I knew somewhere I effed up. I quickly turned the conversation to more appropriate stuff like music taste. He seemed interested in what music I liked a little bit too much and decided he should make me a playlist. I said it wasn't really necessary, but he insisted. Later that very day during training, he kept purposely doing kind things, like taking heavy boxes from my hands or taking the odd jobs he deemed too grueling for a lady. I was a little bit annoyed, but mostly just glad most of the jobs meant that he'd have to go to a different area and give me some space. He'd always find a way back to appear beside me and scare me. I hate being scared, and he laughed it off every time. I was more than uncomfortable at this point, and a nervousness had settled in the pit of my stomach. At the end of the night, After we'd been sent to go home and come back the next day, he decided to walk me out. We would walk back through the maze my workplace actually is, all the way to the employee costume center and lockers. It was there that we had gotten our work costumes and stored our regular clothes in lockers. Well, I was having trouble remembering the combination and I couldn't find the little slip of paper that told me it. The creepy coworker came up and smiled at me, seemingly waiting for me to finish up. I thought he left by this point, so I wasn't expecting him to be there. After a few tries, he reached over and put in the combination of my lock for me. This was a serious red flag for me. He had already memorized my combination, and now I felt as though my privacy was completely gone. Again, I'm awkward and unsure what to do in any situation like this, so I thanked him, but suggested that he let me figure it out next time. I was hoping he would so that he would forget my combination. Remember this for later. After changing back into my regular clothes in the girls' locker room, I came out and he was still waiting there. I asked him why he had waited when he could have just gotten home sooner, to which he replied, "Because I'm a gentleman and a lady should be walked to her car so she can be kept safe." I told him my SO was waiting to pick me up. He asked where, and I told him down the street like an idiot. I still don't know why I complied with this creep as much as I did, but I'd never been in a situation like this one. He told me that was too far for me to walk alone and that it wasn't safe, so he offered to drive me over to my SO's car. Due to how tired I was and how much I ached from the day, I just didn't have the strength to argue. I mean, he was creepy but nice. I chalked up the creepiness to him just being awkward. So without anything else weird happening, he took me to my SO, whom I had been texting the entire time, just to let him know where I was and what was going on. I had a deep gut feeling that I should text him everything I knew about the guy, so I did. When we pulled up, I immediately got out of the car. My boyfriend sat there leaning against the car with his arms crossed. He wasn't very happy about him giving me a ride, but nonetheless, he thanked the creepy coworker for getting me over to him safely. The coworker nodded, seeming to smile at my boyfriend the whole time. This was when my boyfriend first got a bad feeling about him. So we got home and my boyfriend warned me about the guy, telling me he wasn't getting a good vibe from the creepy coworker. It wasn't even 3 minutes after that I got a text from him. He started sending me songs and memes and telling me things like, "I feel like you really get me." Now I was deeply concerned. What the heck did I get myself into? Why did I have to be so damn nice to people? The following day at work, I was on the last day of training and I had a massive panic attack. I have a chronic illness, and the situation ended with none of my managers listening to me when I told them that the pain doesn't last and comes and goes. They proceeded to rush me to the emergency room. A stretcher carried me through work while I was crying and trying to hide my face. The customers were quick to take out their phones and film the whole thing. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but what happens next is even worse. I received about 20 texts from creepy coworker asking me how I was. At this point, I was done. I just didn't respond. After a few random memes, he started texting me that he was drunk and thinking about not going home to his wife. This was the first time he'd ever mentioned to me he even had a wife. I was dumbfounded. Why was he so concerned about me when he had somebody he obviously loved enough to marry? I didn't respond. I went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to my boyfriend looking at my phone in anger. My heart sank, and I could only imagine what creepy coworker had sent now. My boyfriend showed me the only text I had gotten since the night before. It was from his wife texting me from his phone. She wrote me a message explaining that creepy coworker had a problem getting attached to women. She warned me that I should stay away from him and then told me her name. My name. It was after she had explained my name was a thing for him, all of his exes had the same name. Now at this point, my boyfriend was telling me not to go back to this job, that it isn't worth it. But that's not me. I wasn't going to let one creep ruin this opportunity for me. This job meant the world to me and I never wanted to let it go, so I told him if this continues, I'll go to HR. But in all honesty, I didn't even want to do that. I was the new girl. I didn't want the first month on the job to me be fighting a harassment case. Biting my nails the whole way I went to work. Suddenly, creepy coworker wasn't hovering anymore. I thought this might have been him being embarrassed. I was pretty convinced I wasn't going to have a problem after that. On my lunch break, he made sure to go on his lunch early and come find me. His normally enthusiastic attitude was gone, replaced by what felt like anger. I was scared. He came up to me and let me know that his wife was full of shit and just angry because he was divorcing her. At this point, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I kept quiet, hoping he would take the hint. Nope. He told me he had a gift for me and that he'd give it to me after that shift, quickly walking away before I could respond. After my shift, I go outside the work area to the lockers. I had waited an extra hour and a half, even taking a closing position from a coworker just so he'd go home before me. Well, my lock wasn't locked all the way and I was now freaked out. I opened the locker to grab my bag and go, but noticed it. A rolled up piece of drawing paper. I know what kind it was because I myself am an artist. Unrolling it was a naked girl. Suddenly, he walks up even though he should be long gone by then and confronts me. He asked me if I liked it, and because he seemed angry I said yes. I suggested he not do it anymore though, as my boyfriend wouldn't like this kind of gift at all. He rolled his eyes and playfully giggled at me like I was joking with him. But I wasn't. Not only did he follow me the whole way out of the work grounds, but he also got on the employee shuttle that I got on to have witnesses. He sat right next to me, leaning on me. I felt like a deer in headlights, mentally begging somebody to suggest that he shouldn't be that close to me. Nobody paid any attention. Instead, I spent the whole drive trying to get this man to pull his arm off of my shoulders. I felt nauseated and my head was spinning. After we got off, I practically dashed off the bus and ran to my boyfriend, who parked the car at the entrance to the employee parking zone. I got in the car and told him to go. He took off and I started crying. I told my boyfriend and he was pissed. He wanted to turn around and punch creepy coworker, but I talked him out of it through tears. I promised that I would talk to my managers after that. Well, I kept looking for the right time to pull a manager aside, but never got a chance the next night I went in. Now, creepy coworker's attitude did another 180, and he was being extremely weirdly playful. Then he crossed the final line. He grabbed my butt where customers could easily see him. My coworkers kind of laughed and thought it was a game. Because this time I was pissed and pushed to my limit, I went after him. I legitimately punched him in the ass and shouted in his face. "How do you like that, huh?" Seething, he seemed unfazed by my anger. Instead, he laughed it off and winked at me. I went down to the basement for the employee bathroom and quickly threw up the contents of my stomach, crying in the stall, also praying that this would stop. I quickly made an excuse, used my chronic illness, and went home. So fast forward a few weeks, he had completely swapped out his shifts so he wouldn't work with me. I felt like I had won the battle. I sent a message and he realized he'd crossed boundaries, until the night before Christmas Eve. I had a terrible feeling as my boyfriend was driving me to work that night. I felt gross. I got to work and he was there, flirting with other girls, suddenly having this big ego I'd never seen him display before. Like I said, when I met him, he was shy and awkward. It's like his personality flipped every time I had to see him. I never knew which side of him I was going to get. That night, he actually stomped off as all the other coworkers, including myself, closed the joint. We were scrubbing like normal and he didn't seem altogether. So he clocked out early and I relaxed. I figured he had gotten in trouble since one of our 4 managers seemed to be upset that he clocked out without permission. I was there extra late. The evening festivities were done with for the night and my zone was pretty much closed off from customers. So I walked through the massive property that is my work to get to the street. I had started taking new ways to meet my boyfriend who picked me up, just so I wouldn't be followed. This time I was going to walk straight out of the grounds and onto the street where the bus stops were, and my boyfriend would be waiting at the curb. I was about halfway through my approximately 12-minute walk and I was in a dark area. Out of nowhere, as I'm sure you've already guessed, the creepy coworker shows up. He starts yelling my name and following me from behind. I pretended not to notice and walked faster. He yells my name again and seems angrier, so I sprint for it. I sprint all the way to cross the shuttle zone and end up crashing into someone's chest. Thankfully, it was actually my boyfriend who had a really bad feeling and wanted to be as close to my work exit as possible. I looked back and creepy coworker got on a shuttle, but was staring from the window, smiling like a Cheshire cat the whole time. Never in my life had I been so terrified. After that, the next night was Christmas Eve and I was supposed to work. But I just knew if I went in, something bad was going to happen to me. So crying the whole time because I knew I had earned a bunch of points for calling out to avoid him. I cried, asking the lady on the phone if I was going to get fired, and she said she honestly couldn't say. I respected that, but I knew I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let this creep make me lose the job I had worked so hard to get, even changing my appearance to fit their strict standards. No, so I wrote to the only person I could think of, my trainer Christy. She was a lead and she is the kindest girl you'd ever meet. Heart of gold. You just knew being her friend meant that you'd have a trusted confidant for life. Told her everything. Sent her the screenshots of the text sent to me. Finally told somebody with an ounce of leadership that I was scared to go to work. Immediately, she responded and asked if she could tell the managers, and even though I was incredibly nervous, I told her yes. The next day, I was pulled in, and I'm thankful for my ex-manager, Christopher, because he was shocked at everything that had happened to me and quickly helped me write a report for HR. He led me through the steps and even changed the schedule so I wouldn't work with creepy coworker unless he specifically traded shifts. 2 months go by. I am well acquainted with the responsibilities for my work at this point, and I'm comfortable. But of course, there's no stopping a stalker. He had traded a shift and was working the night shift with me. He was angry every time he looked at me, and I avoided him at all costs. Then around halfway through my shift, I'm down in the basement coming back from the restroom. I'm walking up the steps that lead back to my work area, and then I feel somebody behind me. Before I could think a clear thought, I was pushed against the wall, hand beside my head. He leans in and said, "You should smile more." Then the bastard chuckles and walks away. I feel pretty hysterical at this point and run to the closest leader, crying and trying to explain what happened. It was at this point that my manager Christopher, pissed off that HR was taking so long to investigate my case, went to speed it up. Well, after 4 months of an interview process with HR, finally the case was resolved. Not only was he let go, but I was doing really well in my job finally. Nothing to worry me into not paying attention to my duties. Creepy coworker has left me alone ever since, but sometimes I get random friend requests from guys with no pictures and always similar names, always close to his. So, please leave me alone or you won't like the results. I won't be intimidated ever again by you, and I will win every battle you throw at me. That's not me ever again. In the fall of 2010, I decided to go back to college. I was a single mom of 3 boys, but they were all in school now, and me going back was finally possible. The school I went to is a regional campus of a very large university and is located in a neighborhood that is known for crime, meth, heroin, prostitution, etc. But it was only a 20-minute drive from my home, and I didn't feel unsafe about going there. The first day and first class were intimidating. I didn't know anybody, and I was a lot older than most students. I was 28 at the time. I sat down in the back of the room at a table, and a few minutes later, a lady who was around my age sat down next to me. She was very skinny, smelled like cigarettes, had greasy hair and sunken eyes, but she started to talk to me and seemed normal enough. She started off the conversation telling me that she chose to sit next to me because I was wearing the prettiest blouse in the room. Strange, but as an awkward person, I leave a lot of leeway for people to say or do awkward things before I think too deeply into things. She didn't have a backpack, any books, a pen, or a notebook. Nothing. She said her financial aid hadn't come through yet, but she didn't want to fall behind on classes and asked if she could share my book. I agreed and gave her a pen and paper also. After the first class, she asked if I would mind going to the library with her so she could scan some of the pages to take me home. I agreed, and we started to head to the library. She stops and looks at her phone and says her son just texted and needs her to come home to do something. She asks if I will come with her. I tell her I have another class shortly and I can't. Then I ask if she still wants to go to the library first. She says no, that she has to get her son but really can't go alone. I keep telling her I can't go with her and she starts crying. At this point, we were in a common area outside and the parking lot was to one side and the library to the other. I tell her I need to go to the library and she's welcome to come, talk or whatever she needs, but I have to go. I didn't like being outside away from people with this woman anymore, and I was trying to get back to a busier area. She gets really upset, starts screaming, and basically says F you to me. She may have actually said that. I can't remember how the interaction went exactly because I was frozen in confusion by how quickly she transitioned from friendly to crying and scared and to now screaming in my face a slew of hateful, angry things. I turn around to start walking to the library and call my friends so that I would have somebody aware if this lady tried anything more than just screaming. I get to the library vestibule and watch her through the glass doors. She is standing in the parking lot, and then a car pulls up with a man in it and is obviously upset with the woman. They are arguing, but I can't hear them from inside the vestibule. Eventually, she gets in the car and leaves with him. The next day, I was dreading class because I didn't know what this woman's attitude would be that day. But she wasn't there the next day. In the end, she never came back to class. I didn't know her name or, at the time, how to look at a class roster. But looking back, I'm fairly certain she was not enrolled at the school at all, and for whatever reason, was trying to get me to leave with her. I wish I knew her intentions. At the same time, I'm glad I never had to find out. For 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was going to move back to Ireland, my friends and I were at my house having dinner and drinking a little bit. I was renting an apartment in the city, and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I'm 20. That night, my roommate left to go have dinner with her friends. About a minute after she left, somebody buzzed our door to be let into the building. I looked at the camera and didn't recognize the woman. She looked to be in her late 20s to early 30s, so I just assumed it was one of my roommate's friends and she was coming to meet her or something like that. I buzzed her into the building, assuming they would be in the lobby. At first, I didn't buzz her in because I didn't recognize her and she walked away from the door, but then I hit the buzzer as soon as she walked away, and then I myself walked away from the camera, meaning I couldn't see if she actually entered or not. Assuming that if she didn't enter, she would just call or text my roommate. Boy, was I wrong. This woman came up to my apartment building on the 6th floor. She came up just 2 minutes after my roommate left, so I know she didn't take the stairs, and I know they must have seen each other when my roommate got off the lift and the lady got in. Realizing that this is weird, I do not open the door when she rings it. I look through the peephole just to confirm that it was nobody I knew. At this point, I back away from the door and gesture for my friend to be silent. We creep back to my room, which is at the far side of the apartment, and I begin calling my roommate who wasn't picking up. Meanwhile, the lady is incessantly ringing my doorbell. My roommate is not picking up, and my friend is just telling me to open my door. In her mind, it's a woman, so she must be harmless. I tell her that she's an idiot for underestimating the female sex. Women can be criminals too. She keeps telling me to open the door and I refuse. The doorbell keeps ringing and I keep looking out the peephole. At this point, I understand that if she knew my roommate or were looking for somebody specific, she would just call or text them. But she didn't take out a phone at all. She just stayed eerily quiet, didn't call out any names or ask if anybody was home. This was weird to me. I finally get through to my roommate. She said that she wasn't expecting anybody and that she doesn't know anyone in that age range. Then she asks if I'm okay and I say I'm fine. Now it's been at least 20 minutes. I know the lady knows somebody is home because the lights are on and my understanding is that's why she's not leaving. I continue watching her through the peephole and see her go into the lift for a minute and then come back out again. The lift is really loud and I would have heard it move. It didn't. She just went in and came out. In my mind, this means somebody is in the lift waiting for her. That screams sketchy to me. After about 40 minutes, she leaves. I run to our hall and flick on the outside camera. The lady left the building with 2 men. They all had backpacks on. I will be eternally grateful for trusting my instincts and not listening to my friend. Sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. This literally just happened. For context, I'm a tiny 4'10", 160-pound lady. I'm a mom and I personally have quite a few years of working with or interacting with unsavory characters who are sometimes violent. So to say, I actually work best under pressure. I also have had really bad social anxiety, so I'm always on high alert. So I roll up to Walmart, my husband's grandma watching the baby at home, because I need to grab some things for the baby. I get my car and go about my business with collecting of diapers, wipes, and a new pack of pacifiers, etc. After my serious shopping ends, I wander to the female aisle where hygiene products for ladies are kept. I see a very awkward looking gal looking at boxes of pads. She can't be much older than 10 and her sweats and tea give her away. I casually step over holding a box with fun designs on it. I say, "Here, try these. See this big word? It means you won't be allergic. No matter what, that's kind of important." Her shy red face lightens up with a little smile and she says, "Thanks, miss," before darting off to tell a lady in nice clothes. I'm talking like a woman's suit dress nice. Important later. Near the shampoo that a nice lady over there helped me find some of the hyperallergenic ones. I waved at the curious mom who smiled and waved back. As the daughter and mom go off on their own, I notice a weirdly twitchy, ungroomed man following them. I think nothing of it as, who am I to judge relationships? Except, if that was mom's boyfriend, this post wouldn't be here, would it? I'm getting ready to leave after looking for a toy for my son when I spot none other than the shy girl who has a scrunched up, angry, sad kid face. I'm about to speak when I fully round the corner and see Twitchy holding Shy Girl by the wrist, hard enough I can see the red mark forming from the other side of the aisle. I don't see mom and it hits me that this is not the mom's boyfriend, and Shy Girl is in danger. I dart over there and snatch her over to me, screaming in this dude's face, Do you know this girl? What's her name? Where's her mom? The problem is, Twitchy got answers. I'm drawing a small gathering of onlookers now, and Twitchy is visibly more twitchy. He says, I'm her uncle, damn it. Now give her here, and he reached for her. I toss her behind me, and on full autopilot, ready to fight, scream even louder. Describe what her mother is wearing then. He freezes and starts muttering. After regaining his confidence, he hollers back with blue jeans and a shirt just like every other normal person. The crowd seems satisfied, and a few wander off thinking this is a mistake. But the girl is crying as this guy is physically touching my chest with his, trying to get to her. I yell at the top of my lungs, "You are a liar and a pedophile." He screams, "No, I'm her guardian." Then, just as it came from heaven, I heard a shaking, angry but calm mom's tone say, "The problem with that is I'm her mom and I've never met you before." Mom to the rescue. I shit you not, my mouth flew open watching this beige-clad businesswoman swoop in like a gallant angel to rescue her offspring. Her finger in his face, she backs him down like the savage animal mothers can be. I could hear the deranged mom snarl from 8 feet away, clasping tightly to a child sobbing in relief, thanking me and praising her mom. The woman berated this man verbally, and security chased him out of the store. Sadly, he wasn't alone, so I was told and made an exit. I gave the mom my number when she came back to thank me and collect her daughter. If that woman had anything, through her tears, she tried to give it to me. I told her the truth. I have a little boy, ma'am, and all I'd like to do is get home to him. She seemed to wholesomely understand. I didn't actually end up buying anything, and my cart is probably still chilling in the toy aisle. I'll send my husband later. Now I'm going to go home and hold my son for a while. Okay, so a little backstory first. I lived in Thailand from ages 13 to 17 as a missionary kid. My parents never really let me travel by myself unless it was necessary. We didn't have a car or anything, so I would use public transportation. Being a young blonde, white girl in Bangkok, Thailand, where sex trafficking is very prominent, I usually wasn't traveling by myself anyway. On this particular occasion, I was out at a mall with some friends and was going home. It was around dusk, so I was going to take a taxi. I've taken taxis before and haven't had any weird experiences until this time. When I get in, the guy is asking me questions like, "Where are you from?" or "What do your parents do?" They usually ask these questions, or sorts of things, because I speak the language a bit and they are cautious like anyone else would be. But this guy starts asking me very personal questions like, "How old are you? Do you have a boyfriend? Are your parents home?" I immediately started to get uncomfortable. I give him a false name and age and say that my parents were home. This is not where it stops. He continues to ask questions, now smiling creepily at me in the rearview mirror. I start to ignore him and just look out the window. After a minute of silence, he starts to hum. Not just humming to himself, but staring at me from the mirror. I wait a couple of minutes and have my phone in my hands ready to call somebody if he makes a different turn. I know most of the paths to my house, so I would know if he was taking the wrong one. I also start memorizing his taxi number, color, and what his face looked like. He eventually starts full-on singing to me a slow song that I could not understand. I finally call my parents and just say to stay on the phone with me. The guy realizes I'm on the phone and stops immediately and doesn't look at me for the rest of the trip. I told him to drop me off a block away from my house, just so he wouldn't know where I lived. I've never gotten out of the cab so fast. I realized he could have been harmless and not intending to be creepy with his singing to me, but it was weird and I wasn't going to take any chances. I've had one other creepy encounter with a taxi since that time, but that story is for another post. This happened when I was about 8. For reference, I'm female. I grew up in an apartment complex with about 20 buildings, each around 25 floors high. Each floor had 4 apartments, which made about 200 apartments in all. Each building had a car park underneath with an elevator and a flight of stairs that went from the car park to the roof. My apartment was on the 5th floor of an apartment building right in the middle of the complex. I used to take the bus home from school and it would drop me off at the corner across from the complex. I would cross the road and walk home. One day I'd gotten off the bus and crossed the road when I saw that some neighborhood kids had drawn a hopscotch on the footpath outside the complex. I loved hopscotch, so I dropped my bag and started playing. On my second go, a lady who looked like she was in her mid-20s came over and asked if she could play. I was naturally a shy little girl, but I was also very polite, especially to adults. I gave her my stone and let her have a go. Once she had a go, she asked if her friends could play. 3 guys, all in their mid to late 20s, came over. This freaked me out. As I said, I was very shy, especially of men. I was aware that I was alone with them and I felt uncomfortable. I told the lady that they could play, but I had to go home. She gave me a sad look and said that she hoped we would be good friends. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I was pretty scared, so I lied and told her I would take my school bag home and come back. I picked up my bag and hightailed it out of there. I got home and thought that would be the end of it. I was scared of getting in trouble from my parents for talking to strangers, so I didn't tell them. The next day, the lady was waiting for me at the gates to the complex. She said that she was very sad that I didn't come back and that it hurt her feelings. I said I was sorry, but that my mom had made me do my homework. She asked if we could play now. I looked around and saw her friends waiting by a van. She said they wanted to take me to have ice cream at Kiki's, which was a new ice cream place that had just opened. Each ice cream came with a toy, and all my friends at school had at least 2 toys each. We couldn't afford to go there, so I'd always felt left out. Now this lady was offering to take me. I knew I shouldn't go with her, so I said thank you, but I couldn't play today. She got really angry and said I had to go with her. Being a timid kid, I hated being yelled at, so this freaked me right out and I started to cry. The lady immediately said she was sorry and gave me a hug. Then she tried to lead me to the van, saying an ice cream to make it all better. I pulled away and started to run home. This time they followed me. I could hear them running after me and I knew they were faster than me, so I figured I'd hide from them. I flew into the underground car park of the building closest to the gate and hid between the 2 cars. I heard them run down the ramp and stop. Then I heard the lady call out to me. "Do you like hide and seek? Let's play. Ready? We're coming to get you." I was shivering violently and knew that they would find me here. I decided I'd get to the elevator shaft, take the elevator up to the top, then run down the stairs a few floors and take it back down, thinking they would see the elevator stop on the top floor and assume I was hiding there, so they would search while I got away. The elevator was on the other side of the car park. I had to go around 2 corners to get there. I crept along the wall, staying as low as I could until I was around the corner, and then I bolted for the elevator. The elevator was in a small room that had a huge door. I got inside but didn't close the door all the way. I pressed the button and watched as the elevator slowly descended, stopping at nearly every floor. I crept over to the door and peeked out through the crack to see where they were. I spotted them just as I heard the elevator being from behind me. Without thinking, I closed the door. Now, as I said before, the door was huge, so it made a huge noise as it closed, and even as I ran into the elevator, I knew they would know where I was. The elevator was full of people, and I squeezed right to the back, hiding behind 2 boys and a girl who I'd seen around before. The girl lived in my building, but on a different floor. I watched the elevator doors closing, praying that they would hurry up. Just before they closed, a hand shot between them and they opened again. The woman was there, looking furious. "Get out here," she yelled. An elderly woman asked what the matter was, and the woman said I was her daughter and I'd run away. I was too scared to speak as the woman grabbed my arm and tried to drag me out. One of the boys said something was wrong and stopped her. He asked if I knew her, and I shook my head and started to cry. The girl from my building picked me up while the boy told the woman to leave me alone. Since the elevator was full of people who now realized what was happening, the woman and guys disappeared. The girl from my building and the 2 guys walked me home and told my parents what had happened. The police were called, and after some investigating, I wasn't told this until years later, found that the woman and the men were child traffickers. I'm so grateful that the boy realized something was off and stepped in. Who knows where I would be if he hadn't. This is going to be short, but the memory sprung into my mind a couple days back and I thought it would be worth sharing. I live in North Wales, UK. For anybody who has had the pleasure of visiting, it is truly a beautiful place to live. Though, for an adolescent boy, it is certainly lacking in things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated in comparison to the closest cities, there is a dual carriageway running right along the coast from Wales into England. Also, train tracks run alongside this road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. Anyway, there was one night a few years ago when about 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the group had observed a manhole cover nearby, which we believed to be the entrance. On closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be required in order to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily, as the train track was right beside us, not close enough to be of any danger, but definitely a sufficiently small distance to cause panic for any train driver, and panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we had removed the heavy steel disc and had started descending the ladder down to the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress to the other side. At this point, we are totally confined to the narrow space that leads into the main area. If you are confused as to what the heck this bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was rather peculiar. I mean, I would have never known there was even an inside had we not found the manhole. So, as we squeeze and crouch and at one point scrape along our bellies to the other side of the structure, there is a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from one end to the other is surprisingly long, but by the halfway point, you can look down through the narrow gaps onto the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool, which helped keep us calm in a strange way. At this point, apart from the mild discomfort and confinement, we were still just a group of guys on an adventure. But that was about to change dramatically. No more than a few meters beyond halfway, which we could tell due to the symmetry of the passageways through the bridge, one of us claimed that they could see some object in the distance at the far end. Slightly hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I reached the end first, and let me tell you, I have never felt the same sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair positioned facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or a magazine, showing a fully naked lady in erotic position. The reason I don't just refer to it as porn is because something was different about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister, if that makes any sense. More disturbingly, the eyes of the woman on display had been cut from the page, removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that lay before us had rendered us completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we found the condom, the horrendous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got the heck out of there as fast as humanly possible, smashing our knees and chins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder by which we had entered. Of course, we were all praying that the manhole hadn't been resealed, and it was impossible to tell until you reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we promptly dashed as far away as our legs could carry us. I'm sure this ending comes as a disappointment to some of you reading or listening to this, as we luckily never bumped into the twisted individual who sits in that chair, but I must stress how radically out of the norm it was given where I live. The reason I mentioned the population earlier was with purpose, because there are easily enough people here to escape the realms of crazy country folk, yet nowhere near enough people to have somebody clearly lose grip on society without somebody taking notice. For example, there was literally only one homeless man who everybody in the area knew and grew fond of, eventually resulting in a mass gathering at his funeral when he passed away. I sometimes think, though, not recently, as I had more or less forgotten about that night entirely, about the person who climbs down into that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit facing a wall and do who knows what that ends up with a condom full of blood. You honestly couldn't envision a more surreal situation. It has come to my realization that what we unearthed that night has not once been uttered to another soul. As a naive teenager, it was the type of thing you just want to forget, but thinking about it, we probably should have let the police, or at least somebody, know what was down there, because it wasn't the doings of a healthy-minded individual. So there you have it. Apologies for the length. I got a little bit carried away, as it was my first post here, and I wanted to make the reading experience as similar to the reality as I could. Now I'm a few years older and hopefully a bit braver. I'm considering going down there again, accompanied of course, to see what messed up shit might be waiting. This could well happen in the next couple of days, and rest assured, I will 100% post an update, as I currently have no job, so time is plentiful. Thanks for listening. This is my first time posting here, but I have been following this subreddit for a while now. The year is 2003, I'm a 15-year-old boy and living in a small city. This is a place where everybody seems to know everyone. I am typically shy and often use the internet as a way to meet people. During this time, the instant messenger ICQ was still pretty popular amongst the teens in my area. I would often stay up late adding new people and chatting them up. I would do this by searching the city and adding people I knew from school. This is how I met her. Her name was Sarah. We began chatting innocently enough, the normal hey what's up sort of deal. Now, Sarah was a self-described 17-year-old girl, short, brown hair and nerdy. We hit it off pretty fast. We had so much in common and I found it easy to open up. Although, I thought it was strange that I'd never seen her in school. I go to the Christian school, explaining why I never see her. We continue chatting for some time and I eventually give her my home phone number. We chat regularly over the phone until eventually she asked, "Would you like to hang out sometime?" Without hesitation, we make plans for me to go over to her house, hang out and watch movies. The day finally comes for us to hang out. I make my way across the town to the address she gave me. It's a small apartment building. Slightly confused on how she and the rest of her family would fit in such a small apartment, I make my way up the stairs. I knock and I am immediately greeted at the door by a woman, maybe in her late 20s or even early 30s. I knew this was Sarah, but she didn't look anything like she described. I was instantly weirded out, but followed her into her small one-bedroom apartment. I stupidly asked, "So, are your parents home?" She laughed. "No, it's just me here." I'm now awkwardly sitting on the couch. "Do you drink?" She's looking at me across the room. "Yeah, water," I joke. We both share an awkward laugh as she pours me a glass of wine. I never take a sip of it. She sits close to me after popping in a bootleg copy of Finding Nemo. "My brother got this for me while it was still in theaters. He's like a hacker or something." She laughs. At this point, she is very close to me and I'm uncomfortable, and being the weirdo I am, I shift to the floor. I'm now sitting on the floor with my back up against the couch. She then straddles me from behind. "You look so tense." She begins rubbing my back. "I'm really good at this. I can make you feel so good," she said. I lean forward. "Yeah, thanks, but you don't need to do that. I'm fine." I explain I should be going and she points to her bedroom. "You can stay the night. I've never had a guy stay in my bed." She keeps making these advances, telling me how she hasn't done it in so long and she just wants to meet a nice guy like me. All the while, she keeps touching my arms and face. Now, at this point in my life, I was still a virgin, but this lady was not going to be the one to change that. I talk my way out of this situation and head home. The next few days, I get several messages telling me she misses me and she's sorry. Eventually, I cave and respond to one of her messages. I ask her why she lied and what her deal is. She tells me she has a hard time meeting friends and that she doesn't like people her own age. I feel bad for her, forgive her, and we make plans to talk in person. Here I am at my last encounter with Sarah. I ride my bike to her apartment. Once inside, I am greeted not only by her, but her parents too. They introduce themselves. Finally, we get to meet Sarah's boyfriend. Her dad jokes, "We've heard so much about you. She's always going on about how great you are." Her mom follows up. In my head, I'm freaking out. I am not this girl's boyfriend. Sarah grabs my hand and laces our fingers together. She looks so happy. Her parents were just stopping over to pick something up and were actually on their way out the door when I showed up. If we are going to get out of here, now would be the chance. I grabbed the box her mom was about to pick up. "I'll take that down for you," her mom smiles. "You're a keeper." I help her parents load the box in their SUV and hop on my bike. I was just swinging by to say hi. I should probably get home. Sarah wraps her arms around me and kisses my cheek. Ride home confused and plan on never talking to that girl again. She dropped me a few more messages I never responded to. Even called the landline a few times, but we never spoke. I don't know what ever happened to her. I don't know why her parents didn't question my age or if they were just okay with it. This story happened about 4 years ago, spanning from the end of my grade 10 year to halfway through my grade 11. I was in the band room of my school where my friends and I liked to hang out and eat our lunches since we were all friends with the band teacher. But one day there were a few new people there. One of them was Tim. Tim was in grade 12, I was in grade 10, and we hit it off immediately. It was like we were almost the same person. Interests, hobbies, activities, etc. I didn't see it at the time, but he was basing all of his likes off of mine. We exchanged information like Snapchat, Discord, a phone number, the whole lot, and we spent a lot of time talking. This is where things started to go downhill. I was talking to him, and at this point we had known each other for about a week and some change. He says to me that he's in the hospital and that he's really sorry. As soon as I saw this, I started crying. While he was in the hospital for the week and a half he was there, he kept trying to get me to come see him while using the classic, trying to manipulate me to come. I, however, could not want to go, as the mental health recovery unit where I live has a strict family-only policy for the patient's safety. I explicitly told him that I could not see him, and he kept trying to manipulate me into doing so anyways. A few weeks later, just after school ended and Tim and I had been talking for a while, I got a message from this girl named Sarah in my Instagram DM saying things like, "How dare you flirt with my boyfriend?" or "Why did you come on to him when he has a girlfriend?" and things like that. I don't remember exactly, as I wanted to block this whole period of time out. After a while of explaining and telling her I did not know he had a girlfriend, she explained to me that he'd done this thing before and to just stop talking to him. Also, he did the same thing to her. She's so far trapped in an abusive relationship she can't get out. His MO, per se, was preying on young naive girls for mental validation, all while making them feel horrible for not doing things for him. Before Sarah came to me, there were red flags and sirens going off in my head, but I chose to ignore them since I didn't and still don't like breaking things off with people without a good reason. When he invited me out, I'd make an excuse since my gut told me to run. But I didn't run, at least not before Sarah. After the explanation, I quickly started ghosting Tim. It was pretty simple since we didn't actually have any overlapping activities or hobbies, so all I had to do was block him on social media and block his number. Fast forward to the end of November of my grade 11 year, I've forgotten all about Tim and tried my hardest to push what he did out of my brain. Guess who pops up in the only social media DM I forgot to block him on, but Tim himself. And me being the trusting person I was, saw nothing wrong with it. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he was a different boy now. He told me he was off for Christmas break the week after and wondered if I wanted to go to a frat party with them. Now the flags are really rising and I say, sure, why not? Then text Sarah about what's happening. During this hiatus from Tim, Sarah and I built quite a close friendship. She says she didn't even know he was coming back and that he told her that he was going to Cancun with his family for the holiday season, leaving on December 5th, that she's away at her father's place for about 45 minutes out of town for the week of the party, and to do as I see fit. I wanted to have fun, so I went to this party. I was easily the youngest person in the whole party. As I was only 16 at the time, I didn't feel comfortable drinking at a place other than my home, so I chose not to. Tim, however, does drink. Once he was drunk enough for his liking, we got up to go, and I know where I live pretty well, not a big city, but not a small one either, and we went down a street I had never been down before. Again, red flags were going off, and I was tense and jumpy. There was nobody on the street and no lights on in the houses. Tim then plants himself in front of me and tries to kiss me. I, being 16, have never even kissed anyone before, didn't take well to this. Luckily at the time, my mom was making me take a ladies' self-defense course, so I punched him in the eye, kicked his groin, and booked it. Some people might say that this was an overreaction, but I had been sexually harassed before and didn't want to take my chances with a drunk guy, even when I knew. I bus it home from downtown, and when I get home, it's a little after 10:30 at night. I didn't tell my mom since I was scared she'd get mad at me for being at a party. I was irrational and in hindsight probably should have told her. I immediately text Sarah to tell her what happened, and she doesn't reply until the next morning. From what she said, he texted her all sweet-like, and she gave him the address of her dad's place, where she was staying while he was on a business trip. He got there still drunk and pissed off, hit her a few times, and verbally abused her until she had to leave and go to her mother's house. I tell Sarah that I'm sorry for what happened and hope it never happens again, but I cannot keep talking to her unless I want Tim in my life, which I don't. Back to today, and Sarah is still with Tim, and I see her around sometimes with a black eye one day or a swollen cheek the next. To this day, I have trust issues with guys, and it is extremely hard for me to form romantic relationships for fear that this will happen again. Before cutting off contact with Sarah, I did offer help, and she said that other friends did too, but she didn't want people tied up in her mess. I still say hi every once in a while, maybe once a year just to catch up, but that's it.